Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the interview room on this special broadcast here on Friday evening for the Nancy Guthrie case. We're so grateful that you're here. We have, I think, I've assembled a really good panel here. Those of you who have been with our channel for quite some time probably recognize some of these guys. If you haven't been into the post office lately and looked up on the wall, you'll know that they are all on the run. And so up in the upper left-hand corner, like Hollywood Squares, we have Sergeant John Lamb, who's not only a retired homicide guy, but he's also a hostage negotiator. And he was actually the supervisor of the HNT team that our agency, as well as he's done it for many, many, many years. He's also an amazing author. His books are down in the links. And then to the upper right-hand corner is Chief Bob Gilliam, as well as motor officer extraordinaire back in the day. But Bob has also been a commander of investigations divisions for quite some time. And he has just a plethora of amazing experiences. And then, of course, in the bottom right-hand corner is Dr. Gary Brucato, forensic psychologist, who has written the book, The New Evil. That's just one of his books. He's just pretty humble about it. And he's also in the middle of other books that he's writing currently, and those are down at the bottom as well in the link. The reason I've kind of put this team together for tonight is, three aspects of this thing. John can come at it from, let's talk about the notes, let's talk about the hostage negotiation stuff. Gary can come at it from, let's get into the mind of the perpetrators. And then, of course, Bob can talk about some of the behind the scenes administrative stuff that potentially could be going on, as well as all four of us can talk to, why are there different agencies? What do we think is going on? Because we are all in agreement. We were just talking a little bit ago that this is a very fluid circumstance. There is a high potential that 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie is still out there. The sheriff's department has said that. We want to keep that hope. But we also want to be realistic and give you straightforward information from our training and experiences here to talk about what potentially is going on, and do we have what type of movement going with this investigation behind the scenes. So we want to give you, from our perspective, who've worked, all of us collectively have worked very, very high profile cases. So that said, why don't we lead off with Bob, and just kind of tell them a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to John, and then of course Gary, and just kind of weigh in for a minute on on your initial thoughts about what we're seeing here.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm a former police officer, now retired, of course, and I spent 36 years with a couple of different agencies in Southern California, Denver, Colorado, and then ultimately in Wyoming. And just a couple observations about this case. One of the things that really jumps out at me was the initial delay in contacting the authorities, initiating contact with the authorities, and how they did that through the news media, the local news media. And then I just learned today that after they had sent the initial emails to the local TV stations, there was a 12-hour lag period from the time they sent those to the time they sent the email to the TMZ people, Harvey Levin and his group. So that's kind of interesting to me. So that tells me perhaps, and of course I'm speculating here, but perhaps this could be more about seeking attention rather than a ransom or some other reason why she has been taken. And so that's probably the most prominent thing that's jumped out at me so far.
Okay. John?
My name's John Lamb, and I work for, like Bob, 2 different Southern California police agencies. I worked actually for a while with Bob and I were beat cops together, and way back, back when we had hair and it had color to it. I worked a lot of years of homicide, and I been trained in crime scene analysis. I have a fascination with the history of crime. And one of the things that strikes me is that kidnapping for ransom is an extraordinarily uncommon crime in the United States as far as the media being aware. It's not like kidnapping was a cottage industry in Italy in the 1970s and 80s through the 90s. So kidnapping for ransom, I find it this extraordinarily interesting, and I hate to sound as if I'm looking at it dispassionately, but just to see that this is the crime that we're looking at, how uncommon it is. And the other thing I tend to do is I like to look at maps. And we'll get into that later as to where the Guthrie residence is and certain conclusions I draw from it.
Okay. Dr. Brucato? Gary?
Well, I appear quite a lot on the interview, so I think a lot of people are familiar with me, but I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist based in New York City. I see forensic cases and a full clinical practice. I have contributed quite a lot to the literature on serious mental illness and violence. The book for which I'm chiefly known is The New Evil that I co-wrote with Michael Stone. I would encourage people to read it, even if to understand the gradation scale that's given in there, because it's helpful for understanding the mind of an offender in a case just like this one. And I'm on the Cold Case Foundation with Chris and Greg Cooper, who was the former head of the Behavioral Science Unit, and others, and Burgess and others, and do research with Ann up at Boston College. So where we had left off, Chris, and when you and I last talked about this in the episode, was we broke down a whole variety of possibilities, but we were very perplexed by the fact that we were dealing with a home invasion situation where somebody doesn't seem to have committed an SA because we don't have any evidence of it, and doesn't seem to have stolen anything, and there was forced entry, so that ruled out that she wandered off, and we know she didn't have any kind of cognitive problem or dementia or anything that might have led to wandering off, which we do sometimes see in elderly people who go missing. And so what are we left with, right? And so the ransom situation is very peculiar because, as we pointed out, statistically, ransom notes come within 24 to 48 hours. They're usually fairly private affairs, and things are usually wrapped up within a week. You would consider the person precious cargo. You would make sure that they left with what they needed to remain alive. You certainly wouldn't go without your meds and be bleeding. These are things that don't really jive with somebody being taken for ransom purposes. We entertained the idea that Bob has put forward also, that perhaps there was some sort of grandiose, egotistical motive that had to do with Samantha Guthrie being prominent. But I will tell you from the literature on people who do that, who sort of glom onto a celebrity. Think of John Hinckley, for example, with Jodie Foster. Glom on and commit a crime because they are trying to impress that person or parasitically attach themselves to that person's fame, tend to be seriously disturbed. They tend to be on the psychotic spectrum or things like that. And here we see a lot of organization, and we see a lot of planning, and we see things like that. So that ultimately drove us to the question, isn't it more likely that this is somebody who was in the circle, knew this poor woman, and so forth. And unfortunately, with every moment that goes on, the idea of a ransom situation being authentic starts to seem more and more and more like a kind of a red herring, because we're now talking about 6 days. And when you've got an 84-year-old individual being held for hostage, you sort of want to do that quickly. And so I do hope, Chris, we talk about the note that supposedly came today. I think one of them turned out to be fake, and then they like arrested the person, right, who was trying. And we had said on the program that we suspected that there might be somebody who was sort of taking advantage and trying to gain attention. So I think that's sort of where we were at. And so the question is there any new info that adds to where we were at? And then I'd love to see if John and Bob are sort of thinking along the same lines, that we may not even have to leave the circle.
And so so we're going to pick up, and that's why I brought Bob and John here to pick up where we left off in theory. And so today, right, I thought it was a classic move. It was a classic negotiations move, and John, of what we would call mirroring. Okay. Where the sheriff got up to the podium the other day and he says there's going to be no more press conferences until something big happens. I think that was a subtlety and a message to the suspect. You don't talk to us, we're not talking to you. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you guys agree or disagree with that concept in our experiences, right? So,
absolutely. Okay.
So the next thing I want to do tonight is kind of start off with a couple photographs real fast. Hang on. I want to make sure I get the right one up first. And then John, with your, mapping and all the things that you're always looking for, tell us a little bit from a geographical profile concept. What do you think we have going on here?
Whoever went to that house, they didn't find it by accident. I noticed that there are two main thoroughfares into the Catalina Hills neighborhood. There is US 80 and Arizona State Route 77 that comes north out of Tucson. And right at Catalina Hills, the road bifurcates. One heads northwest, the other one heads northeast. The only way you would get to Catalina Hills is if you meant to go there. The neighborhood that the residence is in, the layout of the streets, I guess the best way to describe it would be similar to spaghetti on a plate. The streets loop back and forth. They're not in straight lines. And so this would be a complicated area to drive. The street is not off of a main thoroughfare. If we presume that the incident occurred after dark, we know that the neighborhood is dark, because if I understand what I saw in an article I read, is that there's a county code that prohibits the use of large spotlights or overhead lights from like 11 p.m. until 6. If I'm wrong about that, then apologies in advance. The point I'm trying to get to is that whoever went there knew where they were going, because they were driving into a complicated road scheme in the dark. And I don't believe it might have been a full moon then, but it certainly wouldn't have been enough to compensate for no street lights. So whoever went there for a purpose and knew where they were going.
Okay. Bob, what are your thoughts initially in relationship to location?
Yeah, I think John is spot on. It's certainly an isolated residence. I don't know if it sits on an acre or a half acre, but the homes are spread apart. And it would seem to me that the suspects in this case, the suspect or suspects, plural, would have driven around to the back area of this residence. And as John noted, the area is blacked out at night. And I used to live in an area here in Idaho that had a similar ordinance. It was rural, and we had an ordinance in that community, that part of where I live here in Idaho. And so I know just how dark it can be. And anyone that's been in that type of environment, I'm sure, would concur. So I think they took advantage of that. I'll say they, but the suspects took advantage of that, pulled around perhaps toward the back. And I know that there's some kind of outbuilding that might be an ADU or something beyond the garage area of the home, and most likely entered through the rear of the residence, spent a fairly significant time inside the residence, and then most likely, even though we found blood in the front, Nancy's blood in the front, I still think that they left out the back, loaded her into the car, and then left, most likely blacked out. So anyway, my point is, I think the location is familiar, very familiar to the suspects, and whether that is, I don't think it's random. Let me put it that way. And while I'm commenting on that, I don't think that this is a coincidence that the victim here is the mother of a very prominent TV personality. I don't believe in coincidences of this type, and I don't think it's a coincidence in this case.
Okay. So, Dr. Gary, what's your initial thought process about the geographical area here?
Well, it's interesting to hear Bob and John talk about this, because, Chris, when you and I were on the last time, just the two of us talking, we were looking at what looked like tire tracks.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is
right.
we had concluded that this offender or offenders came in through the back, right, sort of inveigled themselves into the house through the back, and yet it looked like the vehicle was sort of not where, like you would take a person back through the same place you came in, where you were concealing yourself through the back. Why go through the front? It's interesting to hear Bob say he doesn't think that that's what happened, because we were wondering about that, and given where the vehicle looks like it would have been positioned and all that, it led to some conjecture that maybe what went on in there is not what was actually planned, because there wasn't this idea like, I'm going to have to take a, unfortunately, potentially not living person or living person out of this home with me. And so there might have been some intention to go in there in one thing, and things went sideways. But the other thing I think is important to point out, I said it last time, but I want to say it again, even just for the new audience members and John and Bob, is that one of the ideas that I have put forward in the literature, in the forensic literature, is what I've called an elimination murder. Now, I don't want to go to the idea of murder here, but an elimination murder simply means that you don't necessarily have ill will towards a person, but a person that you know is an impediment to something, like your freedom, because they know something that they're not supposed to know, they've discovered by accident, they're a witness, an impediment to money, impediment to a romance, whatever, so that it's just sort of like business in the person's mind. And what is interesting is that in the many cases of that I have identified, almost invariably, there is the staging of an outside individual, a random stranger, coming into the situation and killing somebody or abducting somebody. But because the person is not a sophisticated killer or offender, it's always lousy. Law enforcement figures it out very quickly because they do silly things. Like, there's a home invasion where there's been no SA, there's been no robbery, there's no reason for anybody to even break in, that kind of thing. So I think I am suspicious about that possibility, that there's some staged kind of quality to this. But I am also open to the possibility that we're going to discover that there's a much more commonplace kind of explanation of it. But I think my tendency is start simple. Don't start with, a sexually perverse person broke in. A person broke in with some peculiar psychology where they think they're the next, Zodiac killer sending messages to the news to get attention. If we keep it simpler, I think first we have to eliminate all the obvious things. And so that was my sense of things, and that what you're saying about the movement through the doors and so forth is fascinating to me, because I really don't understand why you wouldn't take the person through the same door that you snuck in through. And looking at those, do you see the tire tracks we're talking about? I'm really curious what you guys think. Chris, is it okay if we ask about the tire tracks?
Yeah, when you look at this was one of the original photographs that was taken right away from a drone. And if you look at this indentation on the dirt up here, it appears that somebody, may have turned here. And even if I can't zoom in on it right here, hang on, maybe I can. Stand by.
Chris, are you referring to the upper right-hand corner of the photo?
Yes, in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay, that's right in front of the garage, I believe.
Yes, and what I thought was interesting, now that here, let me pull it up a little bit more. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
As I pull it in, what say you guys? I mean, I just thought it was an anomaly there into the dirt, and the first impression that I had was, wow, that looks like some type of tire indentation or something to that effect. What do you think?
The bushes up there in the right corner, right?
Yeah, in the upper right-hand corner quadrant up here. Right. And it's interesting that the sheriff, this is probably a good segue to go into the timeline. I mean, Bob, what time did he say she got home? Hang on, let me check. 9:48 p.m.
Right.
She's dropped off by a family member. He's not identified who that family member is that I'm aware of, but he said she's dropped off at a family member. And the question that Gary and I had the other day when we were talking about it is, well, is there a keypad or is there a clicker? What opened that garage up? Okay. Because the second thing the sheriff reported in the new timeline is that the garage closes at 9:50. So it's 2 minutes. The garage is open, the garage is closed, which is kind of, for me, my initial thought, and what say you guys, is this idea of, well, she's 84 years old. She can't walk 50 feet. And if it's a family member dropping off, you would expect somebody to get out of the car and escort her into the house. Now, I don't know if that happened or not. I don't think the sheriff there's credible information out there that tells us that. But I mean, what are the other possibilities? What say you guys?
Well, I think it very well could be tracks from the suspect, and I think your speculation is very plausible, Chris, with dropping a person off. So I have a device on my garage door where I can open it from an app on my phone. I can open or close it, and perhaps Ms. Guthrie had that as well, so she could do that easily. When I first saw those tire tracks, I saw them on TV the other night, and I thought, those look kind of interesting. It could have been made by the suspect. My opinion is, just looking at it from a distance like this through a photograph, is that whatever vehicle made those tracks, they're making a left turn, of course, into the driveway in front of the garage door there, and you can see the two separate tracks, so that would be consistent with coming and going. And but the other thing that crossed my mind too was the initial deputies that responded to the 911 call. Could they have pulled in there? They're driving pickup trucks, I believe, for the most part, being a sheriff's department in Arizona. And so they could have made it.
Yeah, and I think in the right lower corner here, Bob, is the SO.
Yeah.
They're the first guy on the scene there.
So,
Or
you
two.
know, I mean, we can guess all day, but I'm sure if there's any evidentiary value to those tire tracks that the sheriff's office and or the FBI have collected and done the right thing with that evidence.
And there's two thoughts here about transportation. So at earlier in the evening, 5:32, she's at her daughter's house and they're having family games and all this stuff. And she was picked up by an Uber and driven over to the daughter's home. That's 5:32. At 9:48 p.m., she's dropped back off at home, and we've heard two different stories. And some of this is the confusion from the chief or from the sheriff on different press conferences. One, he says she was dropped off and at approximately 9:48 by the family. And in fact, if we watch the press conference, the most recent one, the FBI agent kind of looks over at him and the sheriff goes, "We'll go with the family." I mean, quote unquote, I wrote it down. Okay. So whatever that means. And then there's this, what's floating around potentially that it was another Uber, a secondary Uber that dropped her off, and that individual's been, interviewed and cleared. But then we get into 01:47 in the morning. And this is the first doorbell disconnect in the front. And I want you guys to weigh in on this as I could just kind of put these bullet points out here. At 01:47, the doorbell is disconnected. There's a second, quote, software detects a person on camera, quote unquote, at 02:12 a.m. But the sheriff has given no more information about that. All he said is software detects a person on camera, and the first doorbell information that he qualified was it wasn't syncing up to a cloud and that it was, overwritten. Okay. So the next piece is 02:28. Her Apple Watch disconnects from her pacemaker. And then he says at 11:56 a.m., the family goes on scene. They start checking for her. The 911 call comes in at 12:03 p.m. and the patrol guys get there at 12:15, approximately 12 minutes later.
Okay. Chris, I think it's important to clarify something from the last time we met, that we've now heard from experts on cardiology and so forth that the disconnection of the pacemaker does not necessarily imply that somebody's pacemaker has stopped,
Yes.
but that there is a distance from the phone or whatever is being used to track the so it at least suggests being moved away from whatever you generally use, like your phone or whatever. Because we were unclear on what it meant, and so I think, in a way, I'm heartened to hear that it doesn't necessarily mean that someone
exactly. And so let's kind of collectively think through, what you talked about earlier, Bob. It's pitch black. John, you're saying all the roads are, this is kind of an anomaly to just show up at that house. Okay. And now there's confirmed evidence and there's photographic evidence that two things. The suspect has taken their time to destroy the front doorbell camera. The suspect has also left behind evidence that shows an indication of potential injuries. And this blood has already been tested by rapid DNA, and the sheriff has come out and said this belongs to Miss Guthrie. Okay. One of the interesting things in observation real fast, if we look at the blood, this, let me Let me back this out again. Sorry. This leafy substance is over the top of some of these blood droplets. Some folks had said, well, it's windy, et cetera. But, there's also other things here going on. They're 90-degree angles and stuff. So let's talk first about the type of individual that would take this kind of risk. Okay. John, let's start with you. What are your initial thoughts on kind of setting this up?
Well, for starters, the nighttime sort of what we would call a hot prowl burglary, they were reasonably uncommon when we were working as cops. And the people who do that tend to be, they have they're risk takers. The person who came here, however, and I'm saying he, that's a presumption. I'm doing that for ease of narrative. What's the first thing that happens? The doorbell camera is disabled. And I don't know, maybe everybody has a doorbell camera. I don't. So whoever went there knew that the camera needed to be disabled. And you mentioned that the sheriff spoke of that it registered a person within the camera range. And I read someplace that apparently, unless you pay for a facet of the doorbell camera, it doesn't record it, or it's all continuously live.
John, can I jump in here real
Yeah,
quick?
please do.
So I do have a doorbell camera, and mine is battery operated. Now you can get a battery operated, or you can wire it directly to where the doorbell would be. And if you can go back to the photo that shows where the doorbell camera was, I'll explain something. So you see the on the left side of the window, just above the doorknob, you see what I believe is a bracket. Yeah, keep going. There you go, right there. That held the ring, or the doorbell camera. I think it was described as being a Nest camera, which I think is a Google product. I'm not sure though. And to the right of it, and a little lower, you can see what I think is a doorbell. Okay, so that would tell me that Nest camera was battery operated. So
That's a
removing
good
it from
Bob. No, I've not heard anybody talk about the other doorbell. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that's what it is. I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
But that's what it is, I believe. So removing the camera itself from that bracket is not going to disable it. It's going to keep rolling, okay? And it's going to keep rolling, if you will, until you remove the internal battery. And so what I think was captured on there, they keep calling it a person. I think it was just motion detected. So whoever removed it, had it in their hand, maybe put it in a pocket, or did something for a few minutes until they were able to pull the battery out. Now, another thing that could occur too is once you remove the battery operated camera out of Wi-Fi range, it's going to go blank. Okay, so that could have happened as well. And I believe the time frame was at 2:12 is when that motion was detected on the camera. So just by way of explanation, that is what I think is going on with that motion.
That is very interesting. I've not heard anybody talk about that yet, because we've heard people say, well, it was smashed. She opened the door from the inside, or the suspect opened the door from the inside and, smashed it. But what you're saying is, if it's battery operated and it's not hardwired, which it looks like it is going to be battery operator, that camera's still working. It's still rolling.
It is, until you remove the battery. or you take it out of Wi-Fi range.
Great point. And so that leads us into two storage capabilities, right? The cloud and or a server somewhere.
Okay,
Depends on whether or not you pay for the service, right?
correct. The reporting is though that that for whatever reason both the cameras were not in a subscription mode, so you could get alerts for movement at both cameras, but it's not going to go into a cloud. It's not going to record the activity. It's just going to show you on a live view, a real-time view, if you will. And then, but if you do, of course, have a subscription, then it goes into a cloud. So
Great. That's a great observation, and which could explain the 0212 software detects a person on camera. I love it. I love it. So let's talk about now the amount of time potentially from the 147 disconnect to the 228 app disconnects from the pacemaker. Okay. That is approximately, and this is just a guesstimate, about 39 minutes. Okay. And we don't know what the scene's going to look like inside of the house, but let's talk about the personality type, Gary, about what kind of suspect or what kind of personality is going to spend 39 minutes potentially in the house with an 84-year-old victim. Let's just start there, and then guys, we can all just jump in, as a thought comes to you. Go ahead.
Well, we don't have very much data to really put together too much of a picture. I do think, to pick up on a point that John made, if this is one person alone, I'm pretty willing to bet the person is male. If it is more than one person, at least one of them is male. There is some male individual in this mix. And it's interesting because all of the planning and the meticulous disarming of the camera and all of this really don't point to a madman. I mean, I think we have to sort of take a deranged person off the table here, right? Mm-hmm. So somebody who's doing this because of some psychotic fixation or bizarre. Now, listen, as a psychosis expert, there are forms of psychosis that don't involve disorganization. You could be delusionally fixated on someone and live a very tidy life. But this looks like somebody with very clear mission, who went for a very specific person in a pretty organized way under the cover of night. Now, I think we get some clues from the fact that from the victimology, because this is an extremely vulnerable individual in every way. This is an 84-year-old female who is not in great health, who has difficulty ambulating, being attacked probably in her bed, or at least approached in her bed, under the cover of night, probably in the darkness, right? So we have this extreme vulnerability. I mean, wouldn't you guys say? I mean, it must have been absolutely terrifying for this woman. I mean, to wake up to, if she did, to whatever it is that happened. And I think what it suggests, before anything else, in addition to the scheming quality of this individual and trying to avoid detection, there's a cruelty to the person. There's something to suggest that this is an individual who would be a little sadistic, because there's something about the victim that is chosen that it really points to someone who could do something most of us could not do, right? And by all accounts, this was a very beloved person, a very kind person. So already, you start getting the picture of a cruelty. You also get the picture of an individual who, if they could do that, would probably be able to compartmentalize, in a lot of ways, right? And when you start thinking of that, you start thinking there's something wrong with this person's personality. There's something about this person's personality structure, and you don't develop an aberrant personality in old age. You have a long life of problems that are related to that personality. And so whoever this is, I don't think people are going to go, wow, I never would have expected that. It's going to be somebody who there was something weird or fishy or aggressive or grudgy or whatever about this individual. I mean, wouldn't you guys say, based on previous offenders you're aware of, they don't tend to have warm and toasty personalities, clean backgrounds, and so forth? Okay. And compartmentalization of that type is also not uncommon in people who have dark secrets, people that are living a life and going about their business and are doing something under the cloak of night that other people do not know about. Okay. And that, so what I'm envisioning is a kind of arrogant, controlling, nasty person who has some pragmatic aim, whether it is financial or some kind of attachment to this family dynamic or something that they want to get out of the way or hide, something like that in this person who is living a compartmentalized existence. But when the mask comes off, this is not a very nice man. That's what I'm envisioning. And I think you start to get a sense of how sneaky and cruel this person is. Because, like, for example, let's say this person is sending in the ransom and the whole thing. I agree with the point that Bob made, that there appears to be this sort of secondary thing of possibly just liking the attention, of controlling people, of dominating, of watching. And I have to tell you that if I'm right about this kind of character, they're probably watching all these shows, monitoring all of it, paying careful attention to it, because the person might be trying to plan their next move or what to do. Now, the other thing I think we have to say is, let's just say, for the sake of argument, because it hasn't really been ruled out, but I think it's very improbable at this point, is let's say this was some person who had a sexual motivation, who broke in with the intention of assaulting this person, this poor woman, and did, or wanted to, and it was disrupted. That is probably somebody who would keep doing that. We would be looking for somebody who serially is assaulting people. And to assault an elderly woman, which does happen, is generally done by people who have paraphilic problem, a disorder where they're attracted to someone who is either inappropriately young or well older than them, or some other group where there's an inappropriateness and a danger. Such an individual who does so without grooming and sophistication, but needing to break in the middle of the night and do it, is generally an oddball, local kind of person without a lot of skills, who doesn't tend to be holding a good job and so forth. And it's probably on the local registry. And you're probably going to see that they do something like that again. I don't see any real indication of that. I think this is more of the first thing I described. So I think what I would be considering if I were looking into this would be going around in the circle of people who have in some way interacted with this family and just saying, anybody kind of nasty, weird, grudges, obsessed, fixated, can't get them away from you, because this person, when we figure out who it is, there's some connection to this family, and they are not a benign figure that you would never expect. That's my sense. Now, what do you guys think about that idea, about that? Just sort of go in there and get a sense of the characters that are surrounding this family. I mean,
John Wayne.
This person knows the family?
I don't think there's any question that the abductor knows the family, and I think that if it were an instance of, as you described, the person that was there to commit a sexual assault,
Right.
The deputies there would have already said, "I'll bet it is fill in the blank,"
Right.
because that it would not be their first rodeo. Yeah, they don't just suddenly get to the point where one day they go, I'm going to go sexually attack an 84-year-old woman. There's all sorts of prodromal behavior. This person, I almost get a sense, the word that keeps resonating in my brain, Gary, is that they'll also say this guy is smug, that he carries himself as a sort of, I'm smarter than you, I am, but never in an overt way that's going to get, because he is, in another sense, he's also a chameleon.
Well, that's the compartmentalization that I'm
Yes.
picking up on also. And you know, it's interesting because in my experience, and this is, we're getting now into the sort of psychodynamic, but having talked to people who have committed home invasions, right? And even just off the top of our heads, I mean, some recent cases, the Rachel Marin, remember the Rachel Marin case where the child had been assaulted first.
Yes.
You remember, which we've talked about together. We've
Yes.
talked about Brian Koberger, there was a home invasion. And one of the points that I always drive home from experience with that type of offender is that they tend to have an envy of people who have intact, loving homes. So that the idea is that apart from everything else, there's this perhaps unconscious motivation of, I'm going to ruin it for you too. I'm going to come into this house when you think everything is hunky-dory, and I'm going to, you know, level the playing field. So that there does tend to be that kind of angry, grudge-holding quality to these people. And I agree with you, John. I think when you find out who this person is, there's that double life quality going on. And but I think we have to find out who benefits from this poor woman not being here. Is there anyone who benefits? Does someone get money? Does someone, get away with something? Does someone? That's the kind of thing I'd be thinking. Now, Bob, you also seem to agree that this person knows this house, right?
I do.
Right. What are you seeing that's making? I'm curious what's making you think that confidently that this person, because it sounds like you think they know it even from the inside, like they've been in there before.
I think that's highly likely. Yeah. And, somebody mentioned in the comments here, I was just looking at them. Is it possible that the suspect was inside the residence already when Nancy returned home from dinner? And, I think that's a possibility.
Disturbing, but it happens.
Yeah, it actually happens a lot more than people would think. So, and if it's someone familiar with the residence, then that would be very plausible. Who knows? Maybe our suspect has a key because he or she has done some work around the house. I mean, there are a million possibilities here. But I do absolutely believe that whoever perpetrated this is very familiar with the residence and the neighborhood and knows this victim and what her disabilities are and her mobility issues are, etc.
Well, here's a horrifying thought. I wouldn't be surprised if the same individual who did whatever they did to this poor woman might have at some point been in the person's life and said things like, I'll help you. Come take my arm and we'll walk together. I'll get your cane for you. I'll get your meds. In other words, I'm picturing somebody that might be a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of situation. Because, unless you're casing the place, you're casing the joint, as we'd say in New York. I don't really know how you'd know the inside of the house that well. So I think they know this woman. I really do. And it's right under everybody's nose.
Well, my question is, you mentioned something about knowing the house, getting into the house. Refresh my memory. Were there signs of forced entry?
No,
The back, right?
well, the sheriff.
I don't think they reviewed.
Yeah, the sheriff has not said there was forced.
Oh, that was speculation in the press.
He said
Yes.
the back door was left open.
Okay, the reason why I ask is,
Big difference.
is there houses like this, and for a lady of 84 years of age living by herself, I'd be willing to, what's the old expression, bet dollars to donuts that she had a key hidden someplace near the door if she locked herself out. Because people customarily do that. I mean, think of the years as cops, guys, when you would get a call and you could find the key. I mean, think of the number of times we lift a pot up. Oh, well, there's the key. And even if this person didn't have a key, they might know enough about this woman's life to have been able to immediately access the key and get in, which means that she would not have heard them coming in until, and Gary, when you mentioned this nightmarish scenario of this poor woman waking up in her bed with an intruder, she wouldn't have heard it until he was in.
Right. And do we believe, I'm just curious because Chris, you and I didn't touch on this, but do we believe that the point of assault, she was probably in bed in her bedroom?
You know, you would think, because
You would think, but
if we just for the audience's sake, if we go back to, the victim risk continuum for folks, right? I just made this little sheet here just so people understand where we're all coming from. You have your environment, situation, and circumstance, low, medium, and high risk activities. Okay. Well, what's the environment here? Well, it's her house. Okay. She's in, what's the situation? Well, she's in bed potentially, or asleep at least, at least at 1:47 in the morning.
In an upscale neighborhood.
And so what's the circumstance? Well, she disappears out of her house. Okay. Those are all low risk activities. So statistically, all the evidence points towards the suspect and the victim had crossed paths somewhere, that this was not a stranger who just showed up and randomly abducted, her out of her home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because you take the same concept and you move it towards, let's say, a prostitute downtown Phoenix, or in, Bob likes to talk about Denver and Colorado. So I'm going to use Denver.
Plenty of them there.
No, I'm not trying to throw shade on Denver, but at the same time,
it's hard to. It's a great place.
Let's say, what's the environment, right? 2:00 in the morning, down on the, whatever street, yada, yada, talking to truck driver, talking to John's coming by in cars. Well, that's a very high risk, environment, situation, and circumstance to be in. Well, then what the victim risk continuum tells us then, that is probably a targeted event and a stranger who would be the perpetrator in that. So everything right now, from what we can see, and, tell me if you guys agree or disagree, it's saying that she's probably asleep in that bed. And that's probably why the sheriff doesn't want to tell us about the internal crime scene. He probably knows a lot in there. That's probably why the FBI went back again today. I saw him carrying, looked like a alternate light source, an ALS, into the building. It's probably why they're towing her car tonight. Okay. And they're going, hey, wait a minute. If this guy had 39 minutes in that house, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's take everything that we can, and see if there's something there. That's probably why they towed her car. But so that's the victim risk continuum for all the folks that may have never heard that principle before, which leads to Gary's point, and, where, okay, there's a higher probability that the offender is known to the victim. And so, Bob, what were you going to say? I know that you had some thought about this one. What do you think?
Well, I think all the points are great. And I agree with pretty much everything you all have said. The thing that puzzles me, though, is why is Nancy's blood on the front porch?
Yeah.
And there's my understanding is there's no blood down the walkway. There's no blood detected in the driveway, the circular driveway in front. So why is her blood on the front porch? And what do you glean from the photos of the blood, Chris and John, with the splatter? What do you? I know you talked about this the other night. You and Gary talked about this, Chris, I believe. But explain to me what and the audience what you gleaned from this the blood pattern.
Well, John, you mind if I start for a second?
No, not at all, please.
So if we look at this, okay, the circular drops here. Okay, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Okay, this is what we call 90-degree blood droplets. Okay, that means something is standing over it, and that's blood is dropping down. Now, you can see it typically from, the person. Okay. Sometimes you can see it from an item, like a weapon of sort, a knife or something like that, where you would get that. But there's not a lot of blood here. So that's telling us that this right here, I'm not convinced that, she's not maybe pushed out the door or trying to get out the door. And because we have now this over here on the upper left-hand corner here, you see this debris. This on top of the blood, the 90-degree blood droplet, tells me, and John, you weigh in here, there may be somebody else with her, and their feet is moving. The feet's moving, or something's moving, because this right here on the bottom in the center could be some type of pattern transfer from the bottom, maybe even, who knows what right now. It could be even a shoe of some sort. That means they're stepping in blood, or they stepped in blood, maybe inside of the house. This mat here was not collected, which we'll get into another time. And maybe this is why the feds went back there, and they're going to run the the alternate light source, and this mat's going to glow, and they're going to go, holy crap, look at this. Okay. But so that's what I'm thinking is going on here. John, what do you think?
Well, the first thing that occurs to me is we're only seeing part of a picture here, because unless we know what's inside the threshold of the house, what is on the floors there, then we can only speculate as to the meaning of the blood here. We don't know how long it's been there. I think it's probably a safe presumption that the blood hit that tile during the early morning hours of Sunday. And as you say, it's 90-degree drop, and she was stationary. She was not moving when the blood struck there. As far as the vegetable debris, this almost looks like it's broken off. And I don't know whether there were high winds in the desert then.
Well, there's gravel there too. So
Yeah.
I don't, this up here, I don't see the wind blowing the gravel.
No, I don't see that. And what's more, to me, what I'm seeing with the debris, the flora debris, is it looks like it's been like knocked off of a bush, like perhaps somebody brushed against a bush, and portions, little tiny pieces fell onto it. But until we know whether there's whether there's blood in the house, I agree with you, Chris. We're not seeing a lot of blood here. This could be from a nosebleed.
Yep.
And it stops right there. The other thing we're not seeing is, and again, I'm assuming this, we're not seeing anything in the way of cast off, which would suggest that she was struck out there.
Yeah, this is all satellite, blood dropping into.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going out.
So,
But it's in my opinion, it's moving. It's moving, or she's moving of some sort, because we have this debris on this droplet. We have debris on this droplet, and when we look at the house, let me show you this one more time. And in the corner here, we see this branch. Now, one of the questions that I had was, if the perpetrator came from another environment, did Was this transfer from the suspects? I don't know. I'm just, we're all thinking out loud here. Okay. Because I don't see any source of origination for this debris.
Well, if you go back to the drone view of the house, because I did see that there were shrubs there. And perhaps it was somebody into the shrubs there. Because you're right, I don't see
why
anything
the feds
there on
are
the
out
porch.
front tonight
Yeah.
taking photos and trying to. They're probably thinking, well, where'd that come from? I mean, what do you guys think? Am I in left field on that one?
No, it makes sense. The material is anomalous.
Okay, so that's that piece of the puzzle here. So we definitely know the evidence right now shows us that in fact she's injured of some sort, and she had in her left hand in some of the photographs, elderly people, as we all know, they bleed so easily sometimes.
And Chris, she was apparently a heart patient, and they take blood thinners, and so they bleed easily. Is my point.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if they're thinking, let's get her out of the house, and they start going through the front, and maybe she stumbles because she can't walk well. And I'm not saying she does a header, okay, but something happened to where she's standing there or she's leaning over, something is creating this blood spatter analysis.
Might be something as simple as bumping into a door frame in the dark.
Great point. Gary, what are your thoughts?
There's something that's bothering me. It's like, Chris, we always joke, it's like one of those Columbo moments where you're kind of going like, it doesn't make any sense and it's driving you crazy. Well, what's bugging me is, let's say you walk up to a door camera and you dismantle it. Okay, now you've already walked up to the thing. Now you're dismantling. So why would you dismantle it if you didn't think you were going to do anything else in front of it? What is the purpose of doing that? Is it just to get rid of the evidence of you having walked up to it in the first place? Or is the idea that part of the plan that you have is that you need to pass through that front door? Because I don't understand why you would take the time. I'm curious if either of you have an idea about it, because it take time.
It could be that, or it could be that they didn't want a vehicle to be seen on that camera. It could be that they parked down the street, and then after they were inside and have taken her, abducted her, or disabled her, or did whatever they did to Nancy, then they bring the car up, and now they know that the camera is already disabled. Who knows? We don't know for sure.
Because we're thinking along a similar line, that in other words, whatever plan was hatched, why not go around to the back where there might not even be a camera that you have to approach or dismantle? Why? I guess that it incurred a risk, which makes me think it was important in some way to this scheme. And I can't understand what that would be. It's hard for me to think that it didn't have something to do with thinking that you were going to need to move the victim through a particular entrance or exit and needing the vehicle to be in a certain place. And the other thing, of course, that's bothering, I mean, are there cameras in the back too?
Well, the feds were there today and they took one off the roof.
Ah, good.
So I mean, but I don't know any more about that other than Fox News had a drone footage of one of the evidence folks. They put the ladder, they go up there, and there's another camera up on the roof. Looks like, and it looked like there was a solar panel next to it. So I don't know if it's a camera or if it's a light.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I keep thinking about is, we don't know if they found any DNA in that house, but I keep thinking about that if the person is known to you, known to the victim, it wouldn't be surprising that the person's DNA is in the house and you wouldn't think anything of it. There might be, in other words, DNA all over the place of different people that have visited and so forth, but there's no sort of difficult to explain extraneous DNA, and that might be important. The absence of any DNA from somebody who you can't point to and go, that guy doesn't belong here, is interesting.
Or
I had-
Nancy's DNA in the car that the police had towed. So who
I'm
knows?
wondering about that too.
Yeah.
So, so it's like we're all thinking, similarly about, with each piece of information. But I guess I just find myself wondering why you would go through the risk of dismantling the camera and all that unless the plot that was hatched involved moving through that door and doing things that you did not want on camera.
Well, a
And
couple possibilities, Gary, is that, do we know, like, my back door is different size, smaller than my front door? We don't know where her bedroom is. It may be as easy, it may be as simple an issue of logistics. How do I get her from point A to point B? And perhaps the front door, if it's wider, although I guess my next question would be is, and you've got me thinking, you've got both the heavy metal exterior door and the front door. Again, why go through there? So maybe we go back to what Bob said is that they didn't want the vehicle to be seen.
Well, in the back door,
I'd take her out the back.
and John, remember the back door was found open when.
Yep.
So that tells me I'm just perplexed as to why Nancy's blood is on that front porch, because I don't think she was taken out that way, because they didn't find any blood on the sidewalk, off the porch, in the driveway, etc. Now there could be, maybe they wrapped her or covered her or treated the wound in some way, but I think it's just very perplexing to me as to why
unless we
her
know
blood is there.
how much blood's on the floor inside the residence.
Right.
True.
That's the other thing. I mean, we can speculate on this, but we're doing so with a huge element of the puzzle missing.
And when the sheriff says the door is open, well, what does that mean? Is it closed and it's open? Is it open?
Is it ajar?
Is it ajar? Is it sticking? Oh, I mean, I guess, because there's a couple of ways to interpret that piece, because, why is the suspect going to, all this effort of taking the camera off, leaving the back door open, pulling a car up, injuring her in the house? It's
because they're not a pro. That's the other piece. They're not a pro. That's why I don't think this is like
39 minutes in the house. Is this getting to a place where, right?
Exactly.
We start thinking about, hey, wait a minute, is this a staging event going on here? What do we got happening here? And so let's shift gears just for a second from the house now. Okay. Coppers are on the scene. 911's there. All of a sudden, these letters show up, these ransom notes.
Right.
John, let's talk about hostage negotiations. Let's talk about what sticks out, to you and Bob and Gary. What sticks out in this note stuff? Because, first of all, the demand has a couple of caveats to it. The first letter, the first note.
Well, the delay for starters, the delay and the purported ransom notes. One would expect if somebody's 84-year-old beloved mother had been abducted in the middle of the night for ransom, that the kidnappers would have been in contact with the family most ricky-tick very quickly.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I had to draw. That's an old Vietnam War expression. So for any of your viewers, most ricky-tick means very fast, as in Ricky Tikki Tavi by the Rudyard Kipling story. So we have this delay in the ransom note coming in. The other thing, before we go any further with negotiations, before we negotiate, we need to know that you're the person you have taken, the person you were holding, is alive.
Right.
Wait, that's step one. And so we're not going to waste time until you provide us bona fides that the victim is alive.
Can
Jump in.
let's back up for just a minute.
Okay.
The responding deputies, the initial deputies, believed that she was a missing person. Okay. So I think for the first 8 to 12 hours, they didn't have any inkling that she was abducted. They thought she was missing. If
Remember
you recall,
Margaret Yosa, Chris?
Yeah.
pardon me, I missed.
Margaret.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is you just mentioned something that was an old Oceanside case, and we can come back to that. But
Okay.
Finish your thought process.
So here's my point. The first thing you do on a missing person from a residence like that is you thoroughly search the residence. And I'm not just talking about look in the bedroom, look in the closets. You're looking at every nook and cranny. And if you remember the Jean-Benet Ramsey case and the debacle with the search of the home, and then later finding out finding Jean-Benet murdered in the basement, that's what I'm referring to. So we don't know what evidence is in the residence. I think we can all say confidently that there's a significant amount of evidence in the residence. And so for the first several hours, we've lost all of this time and potentially have disrupted evidence in the house, whether we knew it or didn't know it. And so nobody is really, none of the reporters that I've heard anyway, or none of these podcasts or anything have really delved into that issue and what is there. So and just to expound on that just a little bit. So the theory that a suspect was inside the residence for 39 or 40 minutes, were they looking for something? And or were they looking for valuables? Did they think Nancy had something that might be incriminating to them or something along those lines? Okay. So now you've looked through the residence. You've got probably 4 or 5 deputy sheriffs plus the family members. Remember, the family was there, uh, walking through, searching, going all over the house and all over the premises. So is that potentially disruptive to the crime scene? And I would posit that it absolutely was. And that's something that we have to consider when we're looking at this entire case.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out because we haven't really talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, they had their search and rescue team there. And I used to have probably the best search and rescue team in the country under my purview.
Yes, you did.
And in fact, I'll take out the word probably. I had the best search and rescue team in the country under my purview in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I can tell you that those guys and gals are some of the best, but they're all civilians and they have very minimal training in evidence preservation and what to look for. We, of course, never used them at a crime scene that we knew was going to be a crime scene. But again, they thought that this was a walkaway missing person, an at-risk adult. So, okay, so I threw that out. I just wanted to get that out before we jump ahead. And I'm sorry to jump in there on you, John.
You're
So
great.
go ahead.
But Bob, it's interesting to point out that they thought that it was a missing person case because that implies there must not have been a great deal of blood or other things in the house that would point to a homicide or so that it starts to suggest that what they found in the house looked an awful lot like somebody could have wandered off, hit their head, got a little blood and was gone, but there's no reason to believe that. And also there are signs somebody broke in. And but she had no cognitive problem or history like that. I mean, she got herself home. I mean, they trust her to get home by herself in an Uber. Right. She obviously didn't have that kind of problem. So I think it is very, very interesting that you point that out because it makes me think we could make a guess about what that scene must have looked like.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so John, pick it up again on the notes and
Oh, yes.
the communication here. What are your thoughts on the
Well, the
proof of life? You left off at proof of life.
Well, the proof of life, and you know this because we've done the negotiations. One of the very first things you find out is, are we actually in a situation where you have somebody that's alive? Because if not, then we're going to approach our talk very differently. The next thing is, what was the original? The original demand was for $50,000 in Bitcoin.
Well, it was I think it was 4 million.
Oh,
And that no, that you're right. It kind of ramped up, and that was just kind of what initially it floated out there at that amount. But the original Bitcoin demand was four. Hang on, I'm looking at my notes here. 4 to 6 million, and it was kind of in tranches in a payment plan. Okay, in a payment plan. If we're not going to communicate with you. That was the first messaging. This is the only communication you're going to get, and you're going to send 4 million to this Bitcoin wallet. Okay. And if you can't get it at, by this date, they gave them a Friday at 5:00, then we're going to extend it to Monday, but the rates are going to go up. It's going to go up to 8 million or 6 million. Hang on, 6 million. Okay.
This sounds like a hoax, Chris. I'm sorry. My initial thought is that, I mean, come on, this is what are they? I won't name a credit card company, but it's like, what if you miss the payment? You got to pay the penalty fee, and your interest rate goes up. This almost sounds to me. Now, I'm not saying that it is disconnected from her disappearance. This might well be another red herring thrown out, that to keep the dumb cops chasing after this criminal mastermind with Bitcoin. And it also tells me it's not as if Bitcoin can't be traced.
Well, it tells me, because Bitcoin's in play here, that it's a younger person that understands Bitcoin.
Exactly. Of course, pretty much everybody's younger than us, but I mean,
but the sophistication
yes,
of somebody to say, I want 10 million in $20 bills unserialized, and I want them at this place, this time, this blah, blah, blah. Go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry. So what about the multiple deadlines? We've had a deadline of yesterday, and then now the next deadline, my understanding, is Monday. That's not savvy with a sophisticated abduction for ransom plot, in my book. And then, what about the low and maybe we can talk about this later. I was going to mention the low reward of $2,500. What does that tell us? But that's probably jumping ahead. So let's come back to that.
No,
if you're
but
okay.
you know what I thought on that one? I thought that was that would have been a move John would have made, right? Or you. It's like, hey, we don't have any money. How much do we got, Lieutenant? How much we got, Sarge? We got $2,500.
yeah.
Okay.
What's the worst you're going to say? No.
How many times have we traded bullets for candy, Johnny?
Yeah.
Right? And Bob, right?
Or hamburgers.
I told a story the other night about the Hershey Kisses, where I traded a guy bullet per bullet for one. He had the kids, and I gave him, Hershey Kisses. And he was like, you had a whole bag. I said, yeah, but you get one at a time for a kid, So I thought the 2,500 was a classic move. And I also thought the note was crafted very, probably by the BAU.
Absolutely.
They helped
absolutely.
on because it showed they wanted empathy. And if the suspect's listening, just hypothetically, we never know, right? Just call the cops and tell them the gig's up. Seriously, okay? Don't hurt her.
And then we talked about this off camera. The language that was used in the first that Savannah read had some language in there that was identical to the language in the movie Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And so was that something that the suspects asked for? I don't think that's a coincidence either. I think that was crafted, and whether or not that came from the an FBI profiler, BAU guy, or not, I don't know. But it's interesting to hear that type of language.
Yeah, and the IP addresses, it's they sound like a dynamic IP, not static. So the suspect he's technically a little technically savvy. So that kind of puts him in a different ballpark than, your average cartel guy who is just going to come off the street and snatch your 84-year-old grandmother and say, oh, by the way, yeah, here's my Bitcoin wallet, send the money.
So,
et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead.
so both, I'm sorry to jump in.
No, you're okay.
Harvey Levin and the local reporters have all said that the emails that they read were very well written, and they were grammatically correct. The
Yeah.
language used would indicate someone that's educated and
Well,
not some Neanderthal street thug.
I would lean towards Chat GPT or Grok on that.
Well, yeah, there's some speculation, and I can't remember where I heard this, but they don't think that it was AI. Harvey Levin actually said that, and he's a reporter, he's an entertainment guy. I get it, but I think he's fairly credible, and I think he's well sourced and does his homework before he makes comments. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, no,
They're
I-
well written because this is a person who wants to be admired.
What
This
do you
is a
think?
person
Yes.
that takes the time to, and I'm reminded of, remember when we saw one of the BTK letters, when he said, shall I be called the asphyxiator? And he spelled it correctly. Well, how many of us could, like, out of the blue at a spelling bee say, asphyxiator and spell it correctly? This is a person who has concerns that he's not looked at as being smart enough, as being good enough. And so he will take extra detail and time to craft this message.
Gary, what are your thoughts? I see your mind going 1,000 miles an hour here. Tell us about the letter in terms of the personality type sometimes behind these, and who would you model him after? A perp.
This particular case, I mean, I think we don't know enough yet
Okay.
to say that. But look, every piece of language that we get from an offender is a massive clue because it reveals the architecture of a person's mind. It's like an artistic output. It gives us a clue to the way a person strings thoughts together, their educational level, whether English is their first language, what it is they're trying to say with the crime, how they might be trying to persuade you, steer you the wrong way. I think it's very true that the educational level is important. For example, in the Jean Bonnet case, I was always fascinated that the offender who wrote the note, or at least used the note as a red herring in that case when the child was already deceased, I'm sure, put an acute accent over the word attaché. To put the French accent on the word attaché. That is no dummy that wrote that note, right? So you pay very careful attention to those things. I mean, that's a sign of education, right? Or perhaps somebody speaking French as their first language, but it's interesting. And so I would want to see the content of the language. Now, I was interested in the one that turned out to be phony. Was that the TMZ? That was the TMZ one, right?
Yeah, the guy from Hawthorne.
Right, from California, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so
he's already out of jail.
But just to clarify, TMZ has received the same letters that the local TV stations have. Okay, so
right.
We're talking about two different
Two different,
letter
exactly.
trails. Okay, just so that everybody's clear on that.
But what's interesting about it is the kind of personality that, if these are real, the kind of personality that wouldn't just communicate this to the family, but feels the need to put it into the press, right? It's a very, very interesting when you put it alongside the fact that the victim is the mother of a public figure who is in the press, right? I wonder if that, like your rule about that there are no coincidences, that is a little strange. There are certain types of offenders that like to toy with the press, and why go through the risk of doing that? Why do you need to do that? It suggests that whatever is going on here, there's this sort of secondary motivation that has something to do with this pathetic need for narcissistic control or fulfillment or something, and glomming on to the fame of the mother or so forth. But so like think about some of these offenders that have done this. BTK, the Zodiac Killer, the Unabomber, the Son of Sam, Jack the Ripper, right? I mean, what they have in common is this kind of amusement at the idea of becoming infamous in the eyes of the public. And we don't know how that figures into this story. But why take the time to do it? See, I'm always interested in things that a person does that are not necessary for the commission of the crime, because they reveal things about your personality and your fantasy life. And that's that, you see what I'm saying? Because that was totally not needed to do this. So I wonder what you guys think about that, about this idea that arrogance and control and so forth can be glimpsed in the way this is being done. And there may even be the cruelty of John Bonet style, writing a note when someone may not even be with us anymore.
Gary, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Based on everything that we know about this case and what we've discussed
Right.
here, do you think that that this person or persons is not only toying with the media? I think I would say that perhaps they are, but are they toying and torturing the family, the Guthrie family?
Good question.
I think that in some way, and there are many, many ways we could hypothesize about how it is being done, whatever way we look at it, there's some aspect of this of asserting a kind of a domination or a control over other people, whether it's inveigling yourself into their home when they're unaware, taking them, possibly doing worse to them, the toying with the press, the sort of possibly being out there in the dark and getting away with it and watching all of it, and which I think is what's going on. These are all things that suggest to me somebody who kind of gets off on the idea of being higher than another person. But then you think about, if that's the kind of person you are, why an elderly woman in the dark?
Could it be
Yeah, like a retribution. Yeah.
Yes. Could it be retribution, you think, or?
It's plausible, but the problem is that when we have to be careful, because if that were the case, it would be a very rare in the annals of crime. You'd be dealing with a very unusual offender to do something like that. That's like the kind of thing we see in like a cinematic offender or something. But in common garden variety, cases, there's a financial aim or somebody has some personal motivation trying to get away with something. But I think that whatever's going on, whether it was the sexual, which I don't think, but sexual, the just sort of wanting attention, or the taking the person for money, or whatever, there is this element of dominating and controlling other people because you are arrogant and you're compensating for something. I think whoever this person is in life is something of they're not a winner in life. That's going to figure into this. Don't you guys see what I mean by this?
They're resentful of it.
Exactly, and would need to show you that if you push them just enough. See, and I think that could be used as a chink in the armor against this kind of offender. The authorities can knock this kind of offender. They did that with the Zodiac. When they were trying to get the Zodiac, they went to a psychologist, a forensic psychologist, and they said, "What should we do?" And they said, "Have the psychologist do an analysis of the letters of Zodiac and then publish in the papers that they're convinced that Zodiac is a latent homosexual. He's a latent homosexual. The signs are all there. This is a compensation for his insecurity about his sex, because they thought it was going to get this guy so mad that he was going to come out to say that's not true. That kind of thing. You can evoke these kinds of people by, I also think that this is somebody who I think is not as smart as he thinks that he is, because let's face it, this was not a perfect crime scene. I mean, there are things that were done here that was sort of dopey, amateur hour. How many things do you see here that suggest this is not a professional hit? This
is almost the collision of a cosplay criminal,
right,
bumping up against reality. I'm certain that whoever he was had this planned out, like he was going to be Raffles or something, the gentleman, burglar. And when confronted with the ugly reality of what he was doing, probably derailed him momentarily, which may also be, and again, I'm speculating, let's just say that something happened during the 39 minutes, which left this woman unable to move right away. So now this guy is standing here, his plan is falling apart. What does he do?
Great.
Well, you nailed it, Gary. He's not as smart as he imagines he is. No. And he came up with this one plan, and now on the fly, he has to come up with another one. I mean, I can almost hear his metal gears grinding from here.
Right. But I think that the fact that you're talking about an 84-year-old person in bed, probably in the dark, tells you a lot about, the true confidence level of this person and and all of that. Now, the other thing is, it's funny because I was thinking a lot about this type of offender. I was thinking about, there was a movie in the 60s. I can't remember. I think it was 1964, based on a book called Seance on a Wet Afternoon. Have you ever seen this movie with Kim Stanley?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And what it's about, it's really, really interesting. It's about a couple that
abducts. Stanley Holloway in that?
No, but I love the movie, and I love him. And what happens is they abduct someone, but the reason they abduct the person is so that the wife can pretend that she's a psychic who has solved the case, so she'll become famous. So the idea is that she then can say, "See, we found the missing child," and of course they threaten the kid in private. Don't ever tell anyone you were in our basement, that kind of thing. But the goal of it is to be able to say, I'm a hero. I saved this child. And of course, what happens is in the team, the husband has compunction and the wife doesn't, who's the true schemer in this situation. Anyway, I don't know why that comes into my mind, but there's something about that duality of motive that I think may be going on here. And that idea that I can't help but think that this is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That this is somebody who I could picture saying, I'm so busted up. I'm so sad, about Miss Guthrie. I love.
Maybe volunteer to help.
Yeah, that kind of character.
What a great
segue.
Be
smarter than other people,
to this picture.
Who is that?
This is an ICAC team member.
I had no idea who this was.
Okay, what
it was like Matthew Modine on the screen.
No, just the way you laid it all out, Gary and John and Bob, it was like the heavens just went and just opened for a second, because I thought, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here
with the ICAC element of it?
So, Chris, just explain for everybody what ICAC is and what this ICAC detective may be doing.
So, yeah, and Bob and John, you guys also jump in. Okay, ICAC is Internet Crimes Against Children. Okay, now this device that he has in this box here is what they call a UFED. And he's carrying it into the sister's home on within about 2 miles away. Now, what this device is capable of doing is dumping everything on electronic devices within inside of that home. It's basically phones, computers, laptops, iPads, all you need is wires, and they're all in that box. And you take the devices and you plug them in and you go, wow, okay, we appreciate you. And then you go back, and then there's software back at the office that runs this stuff up, and you get emails, you get text messages, you get photographs, everything in these electronic devices. You get IP addresses, everything is in that box, UFED. Okay, and Bob, John, you and I both know where I'm going, but
yeah. So an ICAC detective may be there with some suspicion that there is potentially a device containing pornographic material on it,
right.
Child porn to be specific. Am I right, Chris? Is
Yeah,
that where you're going?
right. I mean, how many times have we been involved in these high profile situations and you don't pick up the phone? Okay. John, you're the case agent. Are you calling ICAC?
No, there tends to be, and in fact, during my years working in an evidence room in a large police department here in Virginia, there tends to there must be specific information that would lead ICAC investigators to either use that device or, I've also seen them seize all the devices in a house. But no, you don't. I can think of one murder scene in all that I worked where had ICAC existed, I would have called them. But no, you would not ordinarily call ICAC out for a kidnapping or for a homicide.
Right. So the sheriff, I thought, was pretty slick because he played it off very quickly. One of the reporters said, "Hey, we saw ICAC there. Why are they there?" And the sheriff said, "Oh, well, we called everybody out. We needed people, there. And, those guys, et cetera, et cetera." And then, I was on a show today, Nancy Grace's show, and they had, a Reno guy there who's a great guy. And he's like, well, maybe the people that had the UFED weren't available, and they knew that the ICAC guys were available. And so they called these guys over
Right.
to come in and search. And so both of those are potentially plausible answers. However, now I did a little research, and I find out, according to the initial research, is that somebody in that house may have been a school teacher, a 6th grade teacher.
I don't know anything about this.
No, I know I'm talking about it here now.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard this.
As have I.
I heard whiffs of it, but not the specifics that you just.
Okay, so this is now, John, remember when we hooked up the kindergarten teacher years ago in the early 90s, Bobby? I don't know if you remember that one where he had his Polaroid collections and stuff. And John, didn't you work the caper that had all the Marines?
Yeah, that's the case I was referring to that had ICAC. And it wasn't just Marines. It was obviously adolescents from 13 to 18. But had ICAC existed, I mean, and that's presuming that there would have been digital files, but yeah, that was a murder from 1986.
Yeah. And so you ran into, while doing a search warrant, all of this stuff that broke open a huge case
Mm.
on Camp Pendleton, California, because most of the people in the photographs were in the Marine Corps. I remember that one.
Well,
Right?
you're confusing that, Chris, with when I was a detective sergeant.
Okay.
And one of my no, but you've got the facts right on that. Although NIS was interested in the earlier case, but and in fact, the case you're referring to began with one of my detectives coming into me and saying he had information about child pornography being distributed.
Okay.
And he was a burglary detective, but I just told him to run with it. I mean, I had great detectives working for me. They were just magnificent. And so he chased it down.
You're welcome.
And what we did discover was that there was no child pornography, but there was a vast store of photographs of Marines. And there had already been initially a Camp
Yeah,
Pendleton.
don't use the P word, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, the story did explode, and you've hit the big time when Johnny Carson refers to your case is part of his opening monologue on the Tonight Show.
Really?
Oh, it was, my
That is
brother was
wild
living in New
stuff.
York City at the time and knew I was a detective sergeant, and they were talking about this story. And my brother said to himself, or said to his wife, gee, I wonder if my brother's involved. And then the announcer on the news says, now we have Detective Sergeant John Lamb to comment on it. And so he had the
Wow.
answer to that. But jumping back to this, yes, you
Okay.
will see this connection.
Right.
Somebody in
So,
the audience just said, "Who's Johnny Carson?"
Yes.
right. So
Thanks for making me feel older than I am.
Under 25 years old.
Zim Zalabim. Remember?
Remember that thing you used to do with where you put the envelope to his head?
Karnak the Magnificent.
So curveball in anything, I thought this was a huge curveball from an investigative position. And even if they went into Nancy's house, that's even worse if they went into both places. Because what comes to your mind hypothetically if they went into Nancy's house to dump the devices?
Somebody's using the computers there.
Yep.
A la BTK at the church. Interesting. And now, Gary, talk about elimination, why people do certain things.
Well, again, now let me be clear. We're just kind of
We haven't mentioned
about-
anybody.
right.
'Cause
We're just
we
thinking
don't
about
know.
all the possible buckets, and
Right. We're bucketing it.
you get a bunch of people with experience together, and they all seem to be driving in a similar direction, but who knows? And this idea of elimination, murder, and I use the word murder, but there can be all kinds of ways of eliminating people, even just taking them somewhere and threatening them, and so. It means that there is an obstacle to what you want that lies in an individual. No matter how close you are to that person, they simply have to be removed. It's like almost thought of as business. It's kind of like the Lizzie Borden case, which I'm convinced, involved a woman who killed her father and her stepmother and got away with it. She got a lot of money and got to move out of the house and move into a very expensive place. It was a kind of an elimination. There's no real reason to do it. Just they were in the way of money. And so what I think is one of the more common reasons is somebody knows too much. They witness something, or you've got to create a situation in which there's nobody left who's aware of some aspect of yourself. So you picture a person who is living some kind of double life, and out in the world, people are seeing one character. But in that house that night, I believe this poor woman saw the other side of the same individual. The, controlling, angry, probably even frightened, manipulative kind of character, right? Mask is off now. And what I think is, from my experience, the prime thing a person will do to, just like Lizzie Borden did, is you create a scenario in which people think an outsider did it. And usually there's no clear motive for somebody outside to do it because you're not a particularly good offender. John Douglas, when he looked at the Lizzie Borden case retroactively, pointed out that a professional would have at least robbed something to make it look like there was a reason somebody came in to kill her father and stepmother. The man was wearing gold rings and had his money in his pocket and his watch fob on and the whole thing. Didn't make any sense. There was no reason. There was no essay of the woman upstairs. Why do it? So I think that's the piece that people tend to get wrong. I think you saw that a little bit in the Murdoch case too. Is you see this kind of staging of an outsider coming in and doing something. And I think we should explain what staging means, because we're using this word as if everybody understands it. But the point is that staging means you arrange things in a crime to give the impression that something happened that is different than what really happened, right? You throw off people. There are subtypes of things.
There's too much of it. Yeah.
Right. But
overkill.
You move
No
things,
pun intended.
move bodies, you move somebody out of you do whatever you need to do to give a false impression, right? And it says something about the personality of a person, the scheming, the all of the, I think I'm smarter than you, I'm going to get away with this. But I think it is interesting to think about the possibility of elimination, because once if this ransom thing falls away, we're not left with much other than a personal matter. And if we can't identify a grudge against this woman, she wasn't robbed, she wasn't assaulted sexually, what's left? She was an impediment to something and she had to be eliminated by somebody. And then it doesn't become too difficult to start to figure out that it had to be somebody close to her that was going to benefit from her not being there. So that's why I think this is one of these cases where you start small, simple, right? And I agree with everybody here that whoever this is, I don't even think they live very far away from that place.
Well, that theory would certainly account for the delay in the ransom notes.
Yeah. And where are they being sent from? Email?
Yeah.
Or mailed?
Email.
Pretty dopey, don't you think?
Yeah.
This person also seems to think they have some sophistication with technology or computers or something like that too, right? This is sort of interesting too to think about. And you remember BTK asking people, "Can you trace a disc?"
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, see, I have to tell you, I could be wrong.
No, but stay on that thought process for a minute. But I want to add a dynamic into your thought process.
The arrogance that defeats you is where I'm going. Yeah, right.
But I want to add a dynamic. And Bob and John, you tell me what you think, because we worked in a community on the border, 32 miles from the border, U.S. border. Let's talk about an international dynamic possibility.
Like in the Rachel Marin situation.
Right. Anything. Okay. Because, folks were saying, well, the Border Patrol was there, Vortex was there. And I'm like, yep. They have tracking capabilities. They have all these other things, but that's kind of morphed into now, well, the cartel got involved. They do a lot of this, in Mexico, and they're very successful at it. Okay. Yes. Okay. But
this is not cartel.
Thoughts?
Yeah. This is not cartel. I mean, unless they've got some new cartel boss that's gone a totally different direction.
Really, cartels operate on this side of the border. They're going to go after a really wealthy person. They're going to maximize their profit. But no, this is not a cartel. But this is But I can
And-
see somebody trying to portray it that way. Or I've also heard people say, "Oh, well, what if she was taken across the border into Mexico?" And I guess my question would be, why? Um,
The
So-
probability of being picked up and moved, to be kept alive and it's extremely low. I think it happens less
Mhm.
than point. What is it? Less than 0.01%, something like some ridiculously low number. Like if you're using, I have the statistics somewhere. Chris, you know the study I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
What-
but
what's
you
the
know, right now with $50,000 floating, if you floated that to the federales, you would have her back in 24 hours.
Yeah, the Judicials would be on it in a moment.
And the ransom would come very quickly, and there would be no shame about revealing who they were. That the message is clear and violent, right? Usually crystal clear. They'll do things like send an ear or a piece of your nose or a finger or something.
They'll hold the entire family hostage of anybody that they believe could be a suspect.
No,
John and I and Bob can tell you stories about, working the border where, we've had cases where you're going to interview somebody and you're talking to somebody and they're like, I don't want to talk to you. Literally, the federales will go, give us a minute.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a Fourth Amendment in Mexico.
The line was, your Bill of Rights begins 4 miles that way.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing about and I've heard this cartel idea floated, with the current geopolitical situation, do you actually see that happening with what the potential response would be from if a narco terrorist cartel from Mexico did something like that? I think you'd already be seeing a far more militant response. No, this is somebody who knew her, but I can see, and the other thing is not even a suspect. There are people in this wonderful digital world we're in who will just make these stories up because they like to stir the pot. They like the idea of creating a dress, as if there isn't enough drama with an 84-year-old woman being abducted from her home in the middle of the night and vanishing. There'll be people that'll make up stories. So,
Yeah, no, some people were making an issue with the Border Patrol being on scene. And I'm certain that the Border Patrol was there solely for their tracking ability and had nothing to do with a nexus to the border itself. The Border Patrol and the BORTAC teams, they have probably the best tracking canines in the country. Border Patrol agents themselves are highly experienced in tracking, even without a dog. Some of the best trackers in the world are on the U.S. Border Patrol. So that's why they were there. And, again, remember that this initially was a search and rescue mission, not a homicide investigation. So that's why Border Patrol was there. I'm certain of it.
Well, it's interesting because about 40 minutes ago, it came in the news. I got a little news thing about it, that the president said something like that he's pretty confident there are some answers coming, which makes me think, this is going to get, I think this is going to get solved. And my strong sense is, what'd you say, Chris?
I think it will be solved.
I think it's going to be solved. And my strong sense is, I don't think the cops don't have a suspect. I refuse to believe that. What I think is, if the four of us came up with something like that, I'm pretty sure you got a lot of bright people who are thinking similarly or something along these lines. And I don't know, but maybe. And what I'm thinking is that this is a situation where you give a person a long rope and let them hang themselves. I think the idea is you have a person who thinks they're smart and is strolling around and free, and you're just sitting back playing the Columbo game, right? Where you just kind of talk to them, and they think that you have no idea that they're on the radar. I can't help but think that, because I just don't think these are dummies.
oh no,
they're dummies. I mean, come on.
If we come up with it here,
They know.
Of course, they have, and they're, you know, you've got brilliant behavioral scientists at the FBI.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're right here. I think they're playing the long game.
Yeah.
Perhaps, well, what's the thing when you're fishing and you shouldn't? You're chumming. You're throwing
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
in the water to perhaps elicit responses. So,
Or to get someone to try to go back someplace and eliminate some things or do things where
mhm.
you could catch them. Right. I wouldn't be surprised.
And just so the public understands, you know, in our audience here, well, first of all, I want to thank obviously the, you know, everybody that's been here tonight and continues to be with us. I mean, we've got over 10,000 people in the chat right now. Okay.
Wow.
And so just so everybody understands though, this principle of what we would call two parallel investigations going on.
Right.
Okay. You've got one over here, you know, where the FBI's come in and they're like, what do you need us to do? And the point guy at the Pima County Sheriff's Office is going to be that lead homicide detective, whoever that person is. And he's going to be teamed up, or she's going to be teamed up with somebody from the feds. So you're going to have two people that are going to be the decision makers. And then they're going to have a supervisor. And in this case, it would be, let's hypothetically, it would be John. And then John would hypothetically report to Bob. And then Bob would, you know, report to the sheriff. And
John's used to reporting to me, by the way. Just wanted to let you know that.
It's true. My first, yeah, he was my training officer for one night.
and so the chain goes, you know, now you get the PIO and the sheriff, and you should never ever let a politician in front of the podium, but that's today's world. And you know, Bob, you've been there, you know, that's usually the way we used to do it. We never had the chief or the sheriff out front talking to the public because, you know, you kind of run out of bullets when they make mistakes, you know, because they're not on the ground with, you know, the troops and getting the data correctly. Bob,
That's
you want to say
exactly,
something to that?
yeah, exactly right. And we talked off camera earlier about this a little bit, but I'm not a huge fan of the head of an agency, whether it's a police chief, a director, or in this case, the sheriff, being the primary public information officer. I'm fairly certain that the Pima County Sheriff's Department has excellent PIOs, as we call them, and that they would do an outstanding job. I'm not suggesting that the sheriff has done a terrible job, but the simple fact is the head of an agency, especially a sheriff who is an elected official in almost every county in the country. There are a few where a sheriff is appointed, but almost every county, the sheriff is an elected official. They tend to tell us too much in these pressers. And although I do think the sheriff should have held the first press conference, or at least started the first press conference, he should have passed the torch on to a PIO that would be a little more careful in what they said. I believe the sheriff has said too much in this case, and an example of that would be the back door being left open. I would not have revealed that if I were the PIO.
That's good case-specific information.
Now, to be fair to the sheriff, and my personal opinion is he's a very experienced cop, and he's speaking truth to just about every question that he has answered, but he's also speaking from the heart maybe a little too much and not putting his official sheriff cap on. Again, just my opinion. But I've been in his shoes, and I was a PIO for 2 different agencies, and had some of the best training on how to be a good PIO from the FBI. And so I just am not a fan of that. Again, not to be overly critical
Yeah.
of the sheriff. I think by and large he's done a good job, and it's very difficult. Let me tell you, um, going on all these various podcasts and news programs and so forth. That may look easy to some people, but it is not. He's under a tremendous amount of pressure, and unfortunately, he's probably revealed a few too many things, in my opinion. Um, and you also want to limit the number of interviews that you do. He should be there. Again, my opinion. He should be there, making sure that the ship is steering straight ahead, and leave those pressers and these interviews to a PIO. In fact, at this point, I would be doing very, very few interviews. In fact, I probably wouldn't be doing any. I would limit the information to formal pressers. I would take very few questions at this point. And one of the reasons I say that is I think they're narrowing on a suspect, as we've all alluded to here. And I would not tip my hat. I wouldn't even put myself in the position to tip my hat on anything that could compromise something in this investigation. So it's just my 2 cents, but for the most part, I think they've done a fairly good job.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of times here in the two pressers that I've seen the sheriff do where, and I could be wrong on this, of course, but I've seen the FBI agents, the special agent in charge, kind of act like, I don't think we ought to be saying this, and now I may be wrong, but that's what I see.
So to Bob's point, and is, the proper protocol is always, if anybody's going to talk to the press, it would be John or a lieutenant, maybe a captain. Okay. But primarily if, like, because I used to work for John, if John was our team.
So must have been a trip.
Oh, I was, we were delightful.
I can't even imagine.
We were delightful. And
Be
so,
like Barney Miller.
Yeah. Yeah. And so whenever there was information, hypothetically, John, in his position would come to me and go, okay, what do we have? Boom, 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 and boom. He takes that and he pushes that info to the lieutenant. And John says, okay, LT, we're not going here, 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 or here. And here are the reasons why. And now, John, you pick it up from the sergeant's position to, like Bob, for an example. So the public understands really what the flow of information should be in these kind of things. And then, Bob, you just kind of be the, the captain. And where would you go with it when you got the info? Let's just kind of role play this out for 30 seconds. Hey, Sarge, here's what we got. Boom, 84 years old. She's missing. Man, there's a lot. We got something going here, man. It's back doors open, doorbell's missing, blood's blah, 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 blah. Boom.
Well, the very first thing you would want to do is, for starters, me as a sergeant, and if I'm looking at a case like this where I already know that it's going to go national, we're going to get the PIO, okay? Because I'm going to be busy as the sergeant clearing roadblocks for my detectives, and I'm not going to have the time to babysit the media, because they go into a feeding frenzy. They're like sharks when they smell blood. They want something, and you can spend so much time revealing. And the media releases that I wrote, they were basically, we found a dead body and we'll get back to you on it. And that's because in my opinion, and it is admittedly a narrow opinion of a homicide detective and somebody who dealt with the media, you don't need to know the stuff right away. I mean, unless there's an immediate risk to the community. But if it's a murder, all you need to know is we're working it as hard as we can. And if we come to a point where we think that sharing information with the community to elicit information will help, well, we'll do that. But we don't exist to feed the media machine. We exist to solve these crimes. So that's the reason why we got a PIO, and he can jolly them along. So that's my take on it.
So now, Bob, you're the PIO. What are you telling everybody?
Well, the first thing, if am I a captain or what's my
Oh,
role?
what do you want to be? You want to be a colonel? You make the choice.
Generalissimo.
I don't know. Promote
I was
yourself.
thinking something along the lines of commandant or.
How about
Yeah.
general?
Well, the first thing, seriously though,
The chef of the
if I
future.
were the lieutenant or the captain in charge of investigations, the first thing I would ask John is, what do you need from me? What can I do to assist you? And then what do you not want in the public sphere? Okay. What information, and we would go over that in detail. Okay. And so the next thing I would do is I would update the sheriff or the chief and make sure that he or she was kept apprised. And then I would, if I were the PIO, if I thought there was enough information to put out there, if I was getting enough requests, which likely I would be from news outlets and questions and so forth, then I would hold a news conference. And the one thing you don't want to do as a PIO is to tell the news media that you have no comment on something. Okay. And the reason you don't do that is because then they get to craft the narrative. And we're seeing a little bit of that in this case, and we see them on almost every case. But going back to what I said earlier about the head of the agency not being the primary PIO, doesn't mean they can't say anything, get in front of the cameras, because they are politicians. Even chiefs of police are politicians. They're going to want to jump in front of the camera, almost all of them. But you want to keep them out, as I mentioned, because they say too much. Now, if you think, for those old enough to remember the DC sniper case and the chief of police, I don't remember the agency. John, you probably know because you're in Virginia, but
And he's older than us.
The chief was very well spoken and did a good job in front of the cameras, but he told us way too much about this case.
And DC Metro Police, it was actually a task force because there was also murders in Northern Virginia. I want to say Fairfax County, and
it might have been the Fairfax County Police Chief.
Yeah.
And I can't remember his name. He was very good, but he told us way too much from an investigative standpoint. Stuff that
would you ever put a mayor, a council member, or anybody like that on the mic in a high profile like this ever?
Well, I would try to avoid that at all costs, but you're not going to avoid it, especially if you're a police chief and you're working for the mayor. I mean, let's look at what's going on in Minneapolis. That chief has no choice.
Yeah,
no choice at all in standing there side by side to the mayor, and that's a good example of it. You don't want that.
You remember we had a mayor that attempted to bum rush one of our murder scenes. I mean, it becomes necessary. I've had an instance where I had to tell a mayor, you cross that line and I'm going to take you to jail because we're keeping the scene secure. So yeah, you want to keep the politicians as far away from it as you can.
Okay, so
Exactly.
let's get into, we got a bunch of questions here. And the first one is, could Nancy's abduction be retaliation against another family member? Who wants to take a shot at that? Gary?
I think
We don't have enough information.
We don't know. I just know that the signs point to a personal matter, some kind of self-protecting or leveling of the playing field against somebody, but or financial, but some personal matter more than a stranger coming in and doing this.
Okay.
But I think the jury is out on
Do
what.
any of you see any copycat patterns so far in this case from past cases that you can highlight? Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, and thank you so much for your kindness. Do you see any copycats? They're so rare.
Nothing that I've worked.
This is the
That
thing.
comes
This
to
is
mind.
so rare.
I mean, we had Margaret Yosa. You guys remember Margaret Yosa? She was
I
a
do,
school
but
teacher.
and at that, the comparisons stop with the fact that it was initially construed as a missing persons case when in fact it was an abduction,
Okay.
but under very different circumstances.
Thank you, astrology for Mystic with Jen. You should check out my latest maps. I map Nancy. Okay, maps were created, best work in them. Thank you so much. We're so grateful that you have done that. Let's see here. She escaped out front. She wasn't crippled. Okay. Yeah, we understand that she.
It's possible.
Yeah, certainly possible that she might have broken free for a moment.
They're saying you guys are legends. Thank you so much, Real Mikey. Love, you're looking good, bud. Thank you. Let's see here. People who are regularly at church where she goes many times are people who have no place else to go. Many times these people are down on their luck, homeless, or with an odd type of personality. So what Deb, the RN, is asking here, could that be the circle of influence that potentially could have had contact with her?
If she's going to a church in Catalina Hills, I would suggest that that's unlikely. Catalina Hills is it's an upscale. I don't know whether $1 million house is considered wealthy anymore. It certainly isn't in California, but it's an area away from the major urban area of Tucson. I'm not automatically or completely discounting it. I'm just saying it. I would not rate that as being as likely as other scenarios.
Could blood be there prior to the abduction? Lisa 911 wants to know.
Good question. We don't know.
It's possible, but the appearance of it to me looked fairly fresh.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It hadn't turned brown yet.
Same here.
Yeah, and you can tell that from the photo, at least I think so.
Yeah, it was good red. Yeah.
Sarah Adams asked, does it feel staged to a degree? Dr. Gary, Bob, John, anything?
I don't know enough about I don't know enough about what is inside the house. Staged, maybe, I can't say. Planned at some level, yes, definitely. This wasn't an impulsive act.
No, the part that feels like there may be a staged element is sending ransom notes when you may have somebody who's not with us anymore. That kind of thing, where the idea is to say, look over there while I'm doing what I need to. I did want to ask, and it's a sensitive question, but it's attached to what the person asked, is, do we know, now I hate to ask this, but I have to, are there people out looking for possible remains, or is it still being assumed?
No, they had cadaver dogs out.
So they're not denying the possibility that after this many days, this unfortunate reality could have come to pass. Even though there's a possible ransom note, the whole thing, they are still looking.
That would simply be prudent, yeah.
Yeah, and my understanding is they have covered that more than once, not only with the ground search and using those Border Patrol dogs. And I believe the Border Patrol not only has tracking dogs, but they have cadaver dogs as well. And but they've also covered it from the air. And so I think I think they've done a good job. I mean, from everything that I know, they've done a good job in that area. So,
well, the other thing is, you remember, I was just watching the movie Misery. Do you remember with the Kathy Bates? A wonderful movie
It's
about
a
an
great
abduction.
movie.
A wonderful
Let's
movie about an
qualify
abduction.
that's your entertainment, Gary.
That's fine. But no, actually, it's because I was sketching out the idea of writing a book about Hollywood and literary psychopaths. So I was looking at some of these movies, and but I love the movie. And what's interesting about it is that one of the clues that the writer Paul Sheldon is in her possession, at the house, is that the sheriff goes around and asks if there's anybody buying the kinds of things that you would need to take care of a sick person. You're in a small town. You go around going, any bandages? What? I mean, if you've got an 84-year-old woman with health issues in your possession, you're going to need some stuff. You know what I mean? They should be asking around. Anybody come in and buy this?
Well, then you have to keep there's just so many, right? I mean,
I get it, but I'm just saying that I thought it was fascinating how that helped in the story to figure out, through process. But I'm happy to hear that, as depressing as it is, that they're doing their due diligence and considering that possibility, particularly after this many days. And the other thing is, they're all signs, I could be wrong, but various signs, including what the president said to the press, and this remark we just got, something seems to be going on. It feels to me that this is rapidly moving. I don't think this is, a cold case waiting to happen. It feel like momentum is in the direction of this is coming apart. I think.
Well, particularly since we can loop back to one of the original things we talked about was the suspect has not shown that the victim is alive. And this is the whole premise of a ransom, is that you're, I mean, to put it in its coldest terms, you're purchasing a live human being. And there hasn't even been, as far as I know, even any mention in these communications of an acknowledgement or to demonstrate that this poor lady is still alive. And
right.
So that,
I think there's a significant likelihood that she's deceased. That's what I think.
And people are saying in the audience that there's some looking at people's cars and things. I mean that points to wanting to see that there's evidence of a person having been in the vehicle. But the thing is, let's say that it was somebody who knew you. Then how do they know that what they find in the car isn't just left by a person who in day-to-day life could have been in your vehicle?
yeah.
I mean, but wouldn't there be different evidence that could be seen if somebody is being transported, for example, bleeding or deceased or something like that one could be looking for? Because the chat is talking about vehicles being looked at. And do you know what they're talking about, Chris?
Yeah, they've towed Nancy's vehicle out of her garage, which is, standard protocol.
Standard protocol. Okay.
It actually should have been done the first day, but that's the way we would have done it. I mean,
Reminds me of the Idaho murders where they left the vehicles in the parking lot for 2 weeks?
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, those cars should have been done that night, as soon as they were photographed, and you tie them up and you say, get them back to evidence, put them in some place where we can process them, make sure they're indoors.
Well, the next time you guys are teaching or writing about homicide investigations, emphasize that in the contemporary world, the cars are turning out to be the key in a lot of these cases.
Everything is digital and computer inside.
Yeah, all the technology. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems that, there's so many cases I can think of where it turned out to be the car that got you. A lot of serial killer cases I'm aware of, it was the car that undid people. But I think
one of the things they probably would do with the cars, I haven't confirmed it yet, but there's a report out there that they towed her sister's car a couple of days ago, but I haven't seen it personally. But if that's the case, and she was moved and she was put somewhere, maybe what we would call a body dump, or something to that effect, and then all this other stuff starts to roll in. One of the things that we would also do is take the air filter out of that car
Mhm.
and throw it in a bag. You send it off to the lab, to a botanist. You would gather vegetation once they found where the victim potentially is, and then you would gather that, and then you can match those pollens. Sometimes in today's world, you can even get DNA analysis from, vegetations and shrubs, or at least you can put the air filter in the same environment where the potential body was discovered.
Right, but there does seem to be a vehicle in play in this story, because how else would you get this person away from the house, living or?
I think there is.
Well, they didn't pick her up in a drone, or walk with her on the cane, or you know what I'm saying. Obviously, she had to be in a vehicle, and a vehicle that that's the other thing. Is like, it's the middle of the night, you're driving in the dark, the whole thing. So, but it could have been any kind. It had to look kind of inconspicuous, right? It's not like a panel van or something where you've got the person in the back, and it probably was just an ordinary looking car driving along. And I don't think a particularly long distance, because this isn't somebody who's going to want to have to stop for gas.
Well, and the other thing is that exactly, because if you remember, and this is the logistics of transporting a dead body. One of the serial killers in the 70s or 80s was stopped by the highway patrol in Orange County. You remember this? And there's a dead body in the seat next to him. I don't know why the guy pulled over, but there is a logistical issue of how far do you want to drive a dead body around? And so, because this is where, for your novice killer, for your novice kidnapper,
right,
you don't understand the number of variables that begin to come into the scenario where, you're driving along and suddenly there's a cop behind you because you didn't check your brake light. And which is the reason back in the day why we pulled cars over for little things like that in the middle of the night, because people who commit crimes also usually don't take care of their cars.
Well, that's how the Oklahoma City bomber was caught. He was caught because he was driving too fast.
Well, and Rick Willis, the CHP officer, stopped Manson, remember, and gave him a ticket in the milk truck off the 5 there in Oceanside, and that's how they put him in Southern California.
Chris, let me just say something real quick. So there's a lot of comments in the chat. Let me just clarify something. Of course, we don't know whether Nancy is dead or alive, and of course, we want her to be alive. But we're dealing with reality here. We're dealing with likely scenarios, and as tough as it may be to choke down, we also have to bring into a fair and prudent discussion like this to believe that perhaps she is deceased and she was killed on maybe the night that she was abducted. We don't know, and of course we hope that she's still alive. So just as a disclaimer there, I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression, but we have to deal with the reality that maybe she is no longer with us.
Yeah, we're all hopeful that she's with us still.
Sure.
But imagine,
without a doubt, to Bob's point. However, the other side, like Bob also said, being pragmatic about this, or the experience that on this panel, when you see stuff like this, and then you start adding up the math, 84 years old, 2 o'clock in the morning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
No meds.
The math sometimes doesn't math. The math doesn't mathin'. Okay. And so we're hopeful that we're wrong. We're hopeful we're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that's why we're going to, keep praying like everybody else. But something's going on. If they're impounding cars, if they're swarming on homes, tonight, et cetera, there's a whole bunch of movement going forward that we're not aware of right now.
At 9:16 in the evening on a Friday night?
Yeah, we'll wake up tomorrow and there'll be a presser.
Well, the one thing that's horrifying is, imagine the scenario is that somebody has taken somebody away who is no longer with us. And then imagine that individual doing what they do to eliminate evidence and so forth, and taking the time to send phony ransom to give false hope to a family. I mean, think about what that tells you about the personality of a human being. I mean, it would suggest a profoundly cruel person and hostile,
Yeah,
person.
somebody is torturing the family. Bob said that we started off the program tonight, and if in fact this isn't an abduction,
All right.
okay, somebody is torturing this family more so than our conversation. Okay, and so it's really important to, when we see these kind of things. So Brian Enton just reported 3 deputies arrived at Annie's house. Okay. I'm assuming that's the sister.
That's the sister.
Yeah.
Okay. So that could be a couple of things. They're following up. They're letting the family know, hey, this is what's happening. This is where we're going.
We found her.
Yeah, this is where we're heading. Are you sitting down? We have some, blah, blah, blah. So there's a myriad of possibilities in that.
So do we know if these are uniformed deputies or detectives? Because that may make a difference.
That's true.
Yeah. Or a combination thereof.
If anybody knows, can you throw that into the chat here so we can answer that potential?
Gary, do you think that this person continued to views himself as being the victim of, he has grievances and he holds on to his grievances? This sounds to me like something that's built up over some time, because you mentioned the cruelty.
Thank you, Maui.
That it's almost as if I'm getting even.
Well, as I said earlier, I am convinced that no matter how we look at it, all of the different hypotheses that we talked about involve some variation on the theme of being someone who is asserting control or domination and manipulation. And the reason one does that is that you're taking out on a current person in your life some old issue, right? I mean, you've got a long-standing tendency to feel slighted or overlooked, or you feel desperate and entitled, one or the other. And so what you tend to see is that, there's a pattern of this. That's why whoever this is, in their darkest moments, the people around this person have probably wondered. It's sort of like Koberger, the people around him were like, could it be him? Right. I mean, you get a vibe that something is up with this kind of I don't care how much of a chameleon they try to be. And, I am really, really interested to see if we're correct that this turns out to be somebody in the inner circle, near the. But of course, we could be totally wrong.
No, and let's qualify that, Gary. We're not saying it's, when we say inner circle of the family, we could be talking about the pool man. We could be talking about the Amazon driver.
The
We
gardener.
could be talking about the DoorDash guy, the Uber guy. And we're not saying this Uber guy because he was already eliminated.
At the coffee place,
Yeah, and when in that inner circle, we could also be talking about friends of the friends of the friends. Remember, John, in El Torito, we had the 2 kids inside, and it was the 2 uncles. And
yes,
yeah. So it was like, that was a staged robbery. We had a dead guy in the
office,
and we had 2 kids out in the middle of the dining room of this restaurant. They had been cut up and bound around the chairs. I mean, John, your guys were the first guys there, right?
I was the first through the door, responding to the alarm activation, and yes, encountered them, and found the guy in the office. He'd been, and all I'll say is he'd been killed. and I won't go into detail as to how, but we had the sense at the time, and I was working uniform at the time, that there was more to this scene than simply random robbery. And as it turned out, when the detectives worked the case, the circle was the uncles of a couple of servers there, a couple of busboys. And so that, I think, illustrates what the point Chris is trying to make is the circle of people can just be friends of friends, or not even necessarily friends of friends. But yeah, so when we say this, we're not pointing at relations or anything.
Right.
Well,
let's see.
I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Gary. No,
Well,
no,
I was gonna say,
I'm putting these up.
am I correct that the average passenger vehicle on a full tank of gas can go what, 300, 400, 500 miles, like that?
400.
About 400 miles.
Yeah, I would say 400.
Let's say you take somebody in the vehicle. I don't think you're going to want to have to stop for gas or anything like that. I'm just, unless you've got a contain. I think this person lives within a few hundred miles at best, probably not even 100 miles, maybe not even 50 miles away from that house. Don't you think this is a very local?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this person's right around there.
She's not going to be far, and the suspect's not going to be far.
No, and if she is unfortunately deceased, I would be, this is the kind of person who would try to be very clever in where they hid the individual. And so you'd want to pay attention. Is there anybody in the circle who took a drive out of town or went out to the flats, or something? You know what I'm
That's
saying?
why vehicles become so important, right? The telematics inside the car. And if we think hypothetically that it was, 39 minutes in the house, and then the family doesn't get there till 11:30 in the morning, that's a long time to drive, something or somebody somewhere. And so, yeah, it does open up that expansion. And that's why some of the things that are going to be brought in, which were probably brought in, I don't know if anybody caught the helicopter going over and the guy sitting on the edge with his little face shield. Okay. Well, he's looking for anomalies around the dirt and et cetera.
With the FLIR.
The FLIR, yeah. There's a lot of that going on, Bob.
Yep. No, I was just agreeing with you. There's, just to expound just a little bit, there is so much going on right now behind the scenes that we'll find out a lot of details. And I agree with Gary and virtually everybody else that there's a lot going on right now, tonight, as we speak. And I have that same sixth sense as you all do, that we're going to hear something
soon,
quickly this weekend, if not sooner. And that's my gut feeling.
And we're going to hear one of two things. We got her. Okay. Or we're here to report. Okay. We're so sorry. Okay. And those are going to be the two options.
And as it heats up, somebody's acting funny. Somebody's getting spooked.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't think we're dealing with some, colossal, hardened, cold-blooded psychopath. We're dealing with somebody
that's when the real work begins, because now you have a potential. Let's go with both of them. Okay. You have a scene where she was found, where she was brought to, and where she's been held. They're going to have to process that, and that's why the FBI's there, and that's the FBI's evidence team. If she's alive, you got to process all of that where that's at. If unfortunately there's been a demise, you got to process all that area, and depends on, if it's a burial, then now you have an archaeological dig. They're going to get out there and do all of that stuff. And then you've got cars. You're going to process all of that. You've got all the digital footprints that you're going to put in. Whatever you did around the house, you got to put in where the body was. hypothetically, if that's the demise. So you've got all these maybe 4 or 5 crime scenes like that in 10, 15 minutes. And guess what? You can't make a mistake. What happened earlier, where the sheriff said, okay, we're done. Okay. What nobody has been thinking about is who now had a power of attorney to sign a consent form on behalf of Nancy Guthrie.
This is what I think, Chris. I think they had to go back. I wouldn't rely on a consent form in a high profile case like this.
I agree.
John,
Nancy,
tell me if I'm wrong, but I would go back. I would take the time to go back and take a search warrant to a judge and have a judge sign it. When you do that, you're solid as a rock. When you don't do that and you try and cut corners, that's when you run into problems later on in court when you make an arrest and go forward.
And you don't even have the excuse in the old days when we had to do search warrant affidavits on a typewriter without a boilerplate. Nowadays, there's no excuse for not getting a search warrant. And as Bob said, it's cleanest that way. Nobody can come back and say that the consent was granted under duress or you pressured him into doing it. It got to the point where we just automatically went and got search warrants.
Now, with that said, if I were in charge of this investigation, I know this is Monday morning quarterbacking, and I acknowledge that, but I don't think if I were the commander in charge of this investigation that I would have walked away from that home when they did. In fact, I would still be there under the original search warrant. Yep. You can take control of that residence for as long as you need to. I would never have surrendered that. I'll tell you another thing too. Leaving the blood on the front porch, and this is Monday morning quarterbacking, and I'll be critical of them, but leaving the blood on the front porch was inappropriate in my opinion.
Totally agree.
So,
and because the media
for a number of reasons
up there, and they were right. That's how we got these photographs.
Yeah, I mean, look, Brian Enton was, I believe, the first reporter up there. I don't blame him. That's good reporting. If I were the reporter, I'd be up there with my camera, photographing the hell out of that.
Gotta love them. And that's what we used to call, right? Feed the beast. If you don't do it, they're going to fill that void.
That's right.
Like you said earlier.
Yeah, that's right.
Let me get through some of these other.
I'm sorry. Could I
go ahead, Gary? No, go.
Am I correct that the Sonoran Desert is around the area? Because I'm just thinking about if you were thinking about where you might conceal somebody, most offenders that live in the proximity to deserted areas use that as the place because it takes a long time often to find, or at least you think it will. And does that strike you as a place that they're almost certainly searching? Would be the desert surrounding?
Sure, that's why they call the Border Patrol guys in.
Exactly. Well, and here's another
point, Chris.
Here's something else that I think has been occurring for the last 5 days, and that is, first of all, law enforcement in Arizona is top notch. They're top shelf, good experienced law enforcement. Even the smaller departments are highly professional. They know their stuff. And I believe that all of these agencies throughout the state and throughout the region have done exactly what Gary just talked about, and that's searched these remote areas. I'd be willing to bet that DPS has had airships up to search from the air much of the very remote areas of the desert and so forth, and all around Tucson and everywhere in between. So I'm confident that they've done that, and I would be shocked to find that they didn't. And so the search goes on. But
how do you do it? If you have to search, let's say, am I correct? It's the Sonoran? Am I making this up in my head? Sonora Desert is the one that would be around Pima County?
The Sonora Desert, I think you're correct. Now, somebody in the chat
I could be making
is
this up
more
in my
familiar,
mind.
but the Sonora Desert goes into Mexico as well. So,
well, my question is, how do you search a desert rapidly? I mean, do they use aerial?
By air.
So they look for like disruptions in the sand.
They use the FLIR. They use the forward-looking infrared because a decomposing corpse is going to generally show up differently. The other thing we can presume is if this was a body dump, and I want to again stress.
No.
Right now we're just speculating.
Hypothesis.
It's going to be, I'm certain the local agencies, DPS, the county sheriffs, are going down dirt roads, because the reality is that whoever transported the body out there is going to be limited to how far they can get in a car. And then how much time they're going to want to invest. And if this didn't go, if they don't have the tools, if they didn't bring the tools with them, then it should show up. But there are certain areas that you would be going down. I mean, I worked in the desert near Palm Springs, and there were dirt roads that went everywhere, and you would go down those roads just and find stuff. And I'm certain the equivalent is happening there in Arizona.
I mean, in Victorian time. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Gary.
No, I was just going to say, in Victorian times, they would just look for animal activity. I mean, you would look for crows and vultures and buzzards and you know what I mean. And I mean, it was as simple as that, waiting until there were birds of prey or jackals or something gathering, and I don't think it takes very long for that to start. But I think that's a very large desert. I mean,
it is.
A lot of man-hours.
The area is huge.
Chris's point is really smart that might explain the presence of the Border Patrol.
Yeah, and they are the best, and they have air assets as well, so they can fly teams in and to search maybe a partially wooded area and that kind of thing. But let me just, and I think this is probably the case. In fact, I'm certain of it, that once again, these patrol cops, especially in some of these smaller agencies, they're out beating the bush, looking for any clues, looking whether it's a victim or anything that could be of use. And a good case in point actually is going back to Koberger again. There are the two Washington State University cops that were beating the parking lots to death looking for the Hyundai. It was a Hyundai, right? White Hyundai.
You're going to set Chris off because he can't stand it. You can see the steam coming out of his ears. Look at him.
I'm going to remain neutral.
But what did those?
I can see
what did those two young patrol cops do? They went out. They found the vehicle. They were chomping at the bit to conduct an investigation, and then they got shut down. But they were out doing it. That's my point. And I think that's happening in Arizona in this case as well.
Especially if the feds came in, if the federal government. I mean, they would.
The feds don't get involved until, like, there's got to be some. The main reason the feds are there initially is they can throw a tremendous amount of resources quickly. I mean, whereas you have let's say an agency, and you all of a sudden say, I need help. Well, they can show up with 100 guys, 200 people. I mean, because literally they'll get on the phone and say, okay, Phoenix, well, we need LA here too. Send me 40 guys from LA, send me 30 guys from Phoenix. And next thing you know, you've got 100 people there. Resources. Now, it can change rapidly if all of a sudden it's a ransom thing and it's legit, and it's potentially coming over wire, which in this case they could really argue, hey, they're emailing, the ransom notes through the email. Then the feds can say, we'd like to take over this case. You guys can have it if it turns into something else. But would you mind?
Or
And-
CP.
Am I right, Bobby? John?
Yeah. So I was just going to say that now I'm pretty sure there are some FBI agents listening to this tonight, and I don't mean to impugn their integrity or their ability, rather, at all. So, and I'm a National Academy grad, and if you're an FBI agent, you know what that means. But that said, the FBI has some great investigators. But the simple fact is, the FBI usually does not investigate murders. So you're going to find your good murder cops, your good detectives like Chris and John from police departments. The local police and sheriff's departments are going to have your best homicide detectives. It's not the FBI in most cases. Now, I have to say that I used the FBI in a case I had in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where we found a human head. And I had to send some information off to the FBI in the way of photos and so forth. And my good friend, Agent Lydia Pizzato at the at FBI Quantico, she nailed it for me. I mean, just nailed exactly what happened. And so I'm forever grateful for that. But as far as the crime scene investigation, as far as rolling out to a murder or a major crime like that, the FBI does a tremendous job in support, but it's the local detectives that are going to be doing the bulk of the crime scene investigation and running the case. So just so people understand that. The TV shows, too many of them are always concentrated on the federal government and specifically the FBI coming in and taking over a case. Well, that doesn't happen very often. In fact, it's very, very rare. And just to give kudos to the FBI, I've never had a case where they've come in and tried to take it over from me. That's mostly TV stuff. The FBI, in my experience, has always been there to assist and to aid and provide support and resources, and they're top notch in doing that. And so, and other agencies as well, the U.S. Marshal Service, ATF, DEA, all of these federal agents that we hear about on the news and in TV programs, all of them provide just a tremendous amount of support, whether it's a murder or some other type of investigation. Secret Service as well. So,
well, Bob, let me ask you something. Is it could something become federal because somebody has been involved in the distribution of CP?
Yes.
Downloading
yes,
or distributing?
absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
I'm curious about
And
you know,
these serial killer cases, that cross state lines. I mean, of course, the FBI has to be involved in that, and and in some cases they may run those cases, but they're also doing it in conjunction with the locals in each jurisdiction where these murders have occurred.
And one other thing to Bob's point, the ICAC guys are cross sworn.
Mm-hmm. They're task force people, almost in every jurisdiction. ICAC or task force.
So the fact that they showed up, again, this is one of these anomalies that we've, I think all of us were, I mean, I asked Bob and John, and I know Gary, we talked about it even before we went on tonight. We're not saying that there's some CP, in the house or anything like that, or this is a CP motivated, problem. And we can't even use the term because, YouTube will hammer us. But we do find it really weird that these guys show up with their UFED and they start downloading data. Okay, because then you have to ask the question, well, why are they downloading data in both houses? What the heck is going on? If you wanted to do that from a homicide investigator's position, which the first thing the sheriff said that day was, our homicide guys are here. You know what you do? You walk over and you go, impound that. I want that. I want that. I want that. and I want that. Okay. And all of that's go into evidence, and then you send it to the lab, and your computer forensics guys go through it just like they did with Koberger, and they send you back a report and said, hey, by the way, look at all the stuff we found, pictures of Ted Bundy, all this CP, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But here, in this case, for an 84-year-old missing woman,
Right.
they showed up at the scene. Why?
It's inexplicable right now.
Well, we don't know right now.
Obviously, it means something.
Well, John, Bob, what?
It's possible that there was a concern that there might be a capability to restore the machines to their factory settings. That they wanted to grab the material while it was in place there. That's the only reason I can think of, because you're right. You go to a scene like that and you're only limited by your imagination as to what you can take from a murder scene. So I'm not certain exactly what it means, but I would say that their appearance would be certainly anomalous.
Well, that phrase about taking things away from the scene, that raises something else that I've been wondering about, which is part of me thinks that now going down the road of the hypothesis of the person who's eliminating someone who knows too much or whatever, people who commit homicides or other where that's the motivation generally take things from the scene because they're part of incrimination, devices, phones, objects, photographs, whatever, letters that are compromising. And that's something else I'm interested in. Is there something that was taken from the victim or out of the home that will later be found or that's been destroyed or whatever? But I'm interested in that too. Is there something
that's to this point here, Caroline?
Yeah.
Okay. The vulnerable adult is somebody who has the competency level of a child. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They don't handle senior citizens at all. Trust me, I know. I train them. Okay. In fact, I just did a training with an ICAC team on, criminal behavior analysis in relationship to certain things. So they do not deal with 84-year-old women. Okay. I know that for a fact. And so that's why this is kind of a one-off. Okay.
Right.
And it's really interesting. So to answer that other question, I'm at a 5 that this is a CSA, right? Child, you know what I mean? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at a 5 there that ICAC could, punch something in. It was enough for somebody not just to say, I mean, you gotta also process this piece of the puzzle. Okay. They show up in their shirts. Okay. With their box. Let me throw the picture up here. Okay.
Oh, you have the picture?
Oh yeah. Here he is walking in. Look at
that guy.
Look at this guy. It says ICAC on his shirt, Internet Crimes Against Children. That means he works internet crimes against children. Okay. He does not search for 84-year-old women. This guy's got a PhD in caseload, piled higher and deeper. I guarantee it. Okay. And the phone rang in his office. Somebody called him and said, get down here with a UFED. Bob, John, am I right or wrong?
100% correct. Yeah.
He shows up with this UFED, and some detective on the scene says, take that box and plug it into this, and this.
Let's celebrate.
Yep.
But wait, Chris, is it possible that because of these people's general expertise in computers or technology, that they could be utilized where there's no actual concern at all about child crime, or it's
No,
improbable?
you
'Cause you didn't
don't
look
call
very-
the ICAC guys.
That's what it
You
was. I think I'm-
impound the device.
Right.
And
That's
you
what
take
somebody in the chat. It was
this. I
asking.
mean, this is a missing 84-year-old woman, right, Gary? Right?
No, it's odd.
Okay, so what you do is you take the server, you take the laptop, you take whatever's there, okay, and you take it, just like they're taking the cars now tonight, okay, just like they took the camera or whatever it's going to be on the house. That all of these things, day one, day two, because this was day two, by the way, this picture, okay, day two. Okay. You don't call these guys and say, hey, would you check it? Okay. No, that's stuff just like the swab where the sheriff said, well, we have a rapid DNA test that we're waiting for. That rapid DNA test is one of two companies, Andy, ANDE, or Thermo Fisher. Okay. Those are the only two rapid DNA companies right now that can do it within 4 hours. And what they can do within 4 hours is tell you that's Nancy's blood on the porch. It's the same principle. John, you were going to say something.
Chris, a thought occurs to me as to why he responded to the scene.
Oh.
And it strikes to the same thing, the time element with your DNA. Let's just say that the instructions were to collect the computers and the devices, which I'm certain they did. That is an hour to the sheriff's station, an hour to get it logged into evidence. They wanted him to get to work on this immediately.
Yeah.
He downloaded the stuff there and returned to his office. That tells me how timely the information is, that they weren't willing to wait the 2 hours and 30 minutes to get it, and then that presumes that they would have taken it immediately and taken it to the sheriff's station. This is, and why did they feel that there was such a rush? Well, that strikes at what you're alluding to. There is something that made them conclude that the information needed to be analyzed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and we're not saying, I'm not saying anyway, that it's kids that I find it odd that one of these individuals potentially works at a school, okay, and is exposed to children all day long. I mean, it's a hypothesis. I don't know, but I think it's interesting, okay, that they wanted that information rapidly, okay, and I don't think it's by accident, because if you've got a UFED in a department as big as Pima County Sheriff's Department, there's more than one guy that knows how to work it in the homicide teams, and or their evidence technicians have it. Okay, it's not just the ICAC team that has a box. Okay, the evidence guys in those trucks and those vans, they have a forensics IT folks that would have come out, and it's not going to be the ICAC guys. It's going to be the evidence guys.
Yeah, but Chris, remember something. If let's say in this hypothetical, they found something that did suggest child stuff or whatever, that person would no longer be working with children in a school or whatever immediately. The idea would be it would be irresponsible if there was concern like that to have somebody go back to work or whatever. The idea is the person would be tugged right away out. You understand? Because it would be reckless. If you really thought that was a risk, you'd never send somebody back to work at a school.
Well, so we don't know how damaged. To John's point,
what happened?
We have no idea what
no idea. That's what I'm saying. But I think the point is, if something like that is found, there is a very rapid reaction because it's too dangerous.
Well, you got to put a case together, Gary.
Well, yeah, you have to investigate. But
yeah, so
play it safe.
They're dotting the I's and crossing the T's right now, and it may be absolutely nothing. It may be absolutely nothing.
It could just be that they needed this person's expertise to take a look.
I just thought it was an anomaly
It's interesting.
that these guys show up in their shirt, they're from the team, and they happen to be the one extracting data on the scene, like John's talking about, instantaneously. Maybe there's another reason for it. I don't know.
Well, I think that, just to sort of summarize, so we don't get too far afield, I think that what we are saying is that we really have no idea what went on here, but the signs point more and more and more to a situation that wasn't really something that involved a complete stranger, something sexual, something robbery related, whatever, and that it points more and more away from an authentic ransom situation to something else that is personal, that is being made to look like something. And that I'm comfortable saying that that's our best bet. And the other thing that I think we're all collectively saying is this was not a professional criminal. This doesn't look like some kind of hit job by a cartel. It doesn't seem to. This is just some local person who has crossed paths with many times or one time a person. And I think I am comfortable leaning that way. All the other stuff is just these little things where it's like, it's sort of inexplicable, so we dog ear it. They're like these interesting little things that will make sense later, and we'll figure it out later. But
and here's the big question.
Right.
How does this correlate to ICAC?
Oh, that's a whole other, I don't know what that's about.
Well, that's the point.
It is so sad, though, that it's still
right. I mean, how does this correlate to investigators that investigate children? How does this connect? I want to know that.
Well, it's your area of expertise, actually.
Well,
one thing leads to another.
Right, Puffy, right, John, right? There's like this domino chain sometimes that the dominoes just start to fall. Okay. And as investigators, you go into it and you go, oh, wow, look at all this. What is it? Oh, it's the Leering Center. The Leering Center? What do you mean the Leering Center? Yeah, get our fraud guys over here. Okay. What do you got over here, Frank? Oh, well, over here we've got a whole bunch of car parts and they got VIN numbers on them. Okay. Oh, well, get our RAT team here, the regional auto theft team. Get those guys over here because we need them to go through all these parts over here. Okay. What do you got over here, Frank? Okay. You see where I'm going here? Okay. And then they run across, somebody deceased. You don't call ICAC. You call homicide. Hey, Frank, yeah, we got a robbery series going over here. Well, call ICAC. We need some more help. No, those everybody's got a job and they're all doing their own thing. This is just a one-off anomaly. And I hope it's nothing. I
hope so. But I think the connection point that we're sort of wondering about is if, God forbid, anything like that was going on, then one has to wonder if the problem is that this victim knew about it, because that would explain the need to eliminate this person where you can't make heads or tails out of why anybody would want her out of the way. But it's interesting to think about that. And so you get what I'm saying, and think of the symbolism of destroying the camera. The idea being that I'm going to do something to a vulnerable person, and I don't want anyone to know that I did it, to see that I do it. It seems to be the theme of this speculation. So, but right now it's just a wild kind of hypothesis. But I think the other points about this being somebody that has crossed paths, the localness, the use of the vehicle, the probably not going very far in the car, I think those things all probably hold water for professionals that are listening to this. They probably say, yeah, I thought the same thing. All four of us have independently arrived at the same conclusions. Yeah. And Chris, I'm sure you've talked to other professionals that have told you they're also thinking the same way. I have.
Yeah. Any thoughts about how this plays out alongside the new media? I'm hearing about ransom notes. AI. How do we view crime with that perspective? Anybody want to comment?
Oh, you mean that it was sent electronically and all that? Listen, I think it's great if they send them electronically. It's easier to find them.
Yeah, I agree.
Go right ahead.
Somebody,
Go ahead, Bob.
Chris, before you go to this next one, somebody a couple of questions ago wanted us to comment on what the president said aboard Air Force One,
Go ahead.
and
I haven't heard any of it.
yeah, I saw it before we came on.
Okay.
He's just been briefed by Kash Patel, the FBI director, or Pam Bondi, the AG, and you know, I mean, we all know Trump, how Trump signals things, and he knows what's about to come, I think, and that's what he was saying. So,
And it has a whiff of we know something.
yeah, oh yeah,
He's basically saying
Yes.
His
saying
ego won't
he
let him.
thinks something's coming. You know,
There's a message being telegraphed here.
The head's coming through the door before the body.
that's what we call foreshadowing.
Yeah, there we go.
He's definitely foreshadowing something. So I think I agree with you. Next few days, I'd be shocked if maybe we'll wake up to something. But it's heating up, and I think that I'm telling you, I'm convinced that these cops know, and they're doing a great job of playing foolish. Oh, we have no suspects. We don't have whatever. And I'm sure they've got their eye on somebody, and they're just going.
Well,
You know,
and they want to keep it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they should be doing, is
That's what
not
they're doing.
conveying
Yeah.
any of that.
You know, whenever I talk to a murder suspect, I'm about to date myself even more. When I went into an interview, I wanted the suspect to think I was as stupid as Jethro Bodine from the Beverly Hillbillies. I wanted him to think he could tell me that he had just arrived from Alpha Centauri, and I'd believe him and write it down.
And I'm going to have John qualify that statement real fast. And I'm still going to get into your chats here. And by the way, I haven't. This is awesome, John. Tell them about door number 1, 2, or 3, or just do door number 1.
Door number 1 and door number 2.
Yeah.
Murder suspect. The murder victim had been stabbed 17 times and with his throat open from ear to ear. The suspect had been arrested driving the victim's car. There had been some fight inside the home, and with it was basically, it appeared to be a homosexual lover spat, except they didn't know each other. And so as I listened to this fellow lie to me for a couple of hours, I finally said, "Did you ever watch Let's Make a Deal?" And this guy kind of looked at me and goes, yeah, like Monty Hall. I go, yeah. Okay, let's pretend I'm Monty Hall. Here's behind what's door number 1. You're down on your luck and you've just arrived here from New Jersey. And this guy tricks you into coming to his house because he's going to promise you a meal, and so that you won't be stuck on the mean streets of Oceanside. Well, you get there and you find out he's tricked you, and he attacks you. He attacks you and he intends to do things to you. Well, you panic. Hey, you're terrified, you're hungry, you're not thinking straight, and you pull your knife out and you stab him a bunch of times. And then as your panic continues, why, you run and take his car to drive away because you're so horrified by what's happened. So that's door number 1. That's second-degree murder, which ain't good. But compared with door number 2, which is you're a predator who's just arrived here from New Jersey, and this kind man, out of the Christian goodness of his heart, has agreed to take you home and give you a meal.
And by the way, this is exactly how he is.
Well, this is how, and I said, and so you betray his trust by stabbing him to death. Then you steal his car. And then you drive away. I said, that leaves you with the ultimate question. How long can you hold your breath? And he said, what do you mean? I said, because that's first-degree murder in the commission of robbery. That's gas chamber time, baby. how long can you hold your breath? And the guy looks at me and goes, it's door number one. It's door number one.
Was he dressed up in a funny costume? Like on Like a Deal?
He was, well, he was kind of he had blood all over his clothes.
I love the lies that people tell when
Oh, he did, but I mean, and this may even to loop this around. This may even be an interview technique when talking to whoever it was that did this. What was it you meant to do? How did this go? Now you can always pull the story apart later,
right?
But you know, when an interview begins, I want the person to think I'm a moron.
Classic John.
I had a guy.
Hang on, let me go ahead. Then we'll come right back. Well, let's answer this. Full moon that night, 96% illumination in Tucson, 1:50 a.m. I think perps approached on the foot from the brush. They made a possible plan for that night. Didn't have to use flashlights to navigate the brushy terrain. Great point.
Well, have you looked at the map of the neighborhood? Because that would mean that they would have had to have parked on another street behind. It's kind of like a kidney-shaped neighborhood. And so irrespective of, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I've worked in the desert with full moons, and yes, you can navigate like that. But it probably would have involved them coming through another yard, which would increase the possibility of being discovered. So, but it's a very valid point about the full moon.
Yeah, and there also, I mean, for also something to consider. In September, they had 4 people that were a woman was acting as a decoy as an Amazon gal. She'd go to the front door and ring the doorbell, and then they had 3 guys who were making, forced entry through the back. So those are the kind of things that we would look for in that circle, just in case to cross the dot, cross the T's, dot the I's. So that could be a case. That could be a possibility here too. Anything. But let's answer this. What did the siblings' public plea second the abductor indicate, if anything? Do you think the ransom is credible, or they're solely being strategic with a suspect? I think we are all in agreement, based on what we've been talking about. And thank you so much, Leah. We think they're being strategic here, that there's 2 trains, maybe even 3 trains moving the station at the same time. But all 3 of them are being worked. Any other thoughts?
Well, don't we agree that if, let's say, they knew that this was a ruse or some BS thing, don't you think they'd want the offender to believe that they believe the ransom story?
Yeah.
That he's smarter and outside. I mean, they're not going to tip their hand to the idea. Right. Oh, yeah, we buy it, right? Because you want this idiot to meet up with you somewhere, or you know what I'm saying. I think it's my strong sense is these are intelligent people who already have somebody's number, but for some reason it is necessary to lay low and just let somebody hang themselves. And I don't know why that would be, but I can't help but think that's what's going on. I just find it hard to believe otherwise. But haven't you guys used that technique in your own efforts?
Misdirection?
You
already have a suspect in mind, but you lay low, you pretend that you believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course. I think it's very because everything we're coming up with here, there is no doubt in my mind this is a similar thought process.
Yeah, I don't understand what I'm hearing. Wait, let me go ask him.
Yeah. Yep. These guys know what they're doing in this case, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
But the thing about people lying to is hysterical to me, because what I was going to say earlier is that I think it happens in people who lack empathy, is that they can't feel that you could tell their story is stupid. Because it's like they can't sense that you're intelligent enough to go, yeah, right, like stop pulling my leg, So they'll tell you a stupid story, but very often the stupid story is revealing, like Kohlberger talking about being out in the, looking at the stars, and that dumb story. Everyone knew that story was ridiculous, but he thought people believed it because he couldn't feel it, I think. And
Well,
you know,
he doesn't pay enough attention to the people around him. He doesn't care about them enough.
exactly.
Stargazer.
But sometimes it's insulting. I mean, I won't say the context, but I encountered a person once who used to tell the story that he was carrying around in his wallet the autograph of Abraham Lincoln that had been given to his great something or other, but it was signed in felt tip pen. And he used to carry it around and show it to you. And I just go, wow, that's terrific. You know, tell me the story. And he would say with this ridiculous, exaggerated Southern drawl, my granddaddy met old, you know, and he used to tell the story. Grandpa told me that he near peed himself when Abe Lincoln signed that. First of all, why would somebody from the South be enthused to be getting an autograph of Abraham Lincoln? Why is it in felt tip, which didn't exist yet? You know, and I'm sitting there going, what kind of turnip truck do you think they just rolled up? You know, some people are amazing in there, and I'm sure you've heard every BS story under the sun. You know, nonsense, absolute nonsense. But then you get these brilliant people that really fool you. You know, I don't think that's this person. This is no genius.
Well, that was the great thing about where we were. We had UCSD down the hall, you know, down the street.
Oh yeah.
And we've hooked up professors, you know, and I hooked up a math professor one night because he literally looked at me and he said, "How did you know I did it?" And I said, "This is how I answered him. I did the math."
Well, back in the day,
Go, Bobby.
we would go to domestic violence incidents, and if the situation presented itself correctly, we would divorce the two parties by having them place their hand on our badge, and we'd divorce them, and we'd be done with the call. So yeah, you use ruses, and
but you have to be humble enough to be okay with playing stupid.
I never did things like that.
No, you never did anything like that.
No, I was straight arrow.
Oh, before you go down there, let's get through a couple more. We only have like 7 or more, but then don't forget your thought. Could you all tell if they dusted for fingerprints on the security door from the porch pics? If not, why would they not process that? You know, I
can't tell what kind of, if they used, I mean, depending on kind of powder they used, I didn't see any on there. If I had any doubts at a murder scene, I'd just take the door with me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I'll bet a retirement check that they process that for prints.
Yeah, no, we haven't seen him yet. But yeah, we'll see. Let's see what happens. Let's see. I know it's a long shot, and thank you, Rome, but can't they take her phone or Apple Watch and do a grid search to see if it connects? Typically, no, but what they do have, they have a program. It's called Gladiator, and they can take that and connect those dots. This is how they caught Alex Cox and put him in the backyard in the Lori Vallow case with the kids near the fire pit. Sophie, have you considered the Epstein link? Daughter involved giving victims interviews. Guthrie mentioned in documents, revenge. Could someone have deceived or pressured this lady? Why would Trump get involved? Well, we don't know if it's a conspiracy, but you know, that's certainly, I'm sure the investigators who are doing that would consider all of those angles. And thank you so much for that comment and donation. Stranger danger or acquaintance danger? Acquaintance danger.
Yep.
That's my answer. Bob?
I'm sorry, I was answering a text.
Stranger or acquaintance danger in this one?
Acquaintance. Yeah.
Gary?
I think so. I'm certainly leaning that way.
And Mab, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Thank you, Bob. Let's see here. TC teaches AP biology. Theoretically, a body might be more difficult to find. He is STEM related and might be savvy at sending time-released emails. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That is interesting. thank you for all your service. We thank you. We're grateful to each and every one of you who support us out here. Okay, so John, tell your story. I cut you off. Do you remember it? You just
I'm not
testing me?
sure which story you wanted me to tell.
Never mind. I was just testing you.
And then I've got to jump off. I've got to get to work at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's 1:11 here.
Okay, so
Jump off. But I love John's story, so I'll stay for it.
yeah, no, by the way, everybody, we are so grateful, each and every one of us here. John is an author. He's got another book coming out. John, you want to tell him about it?
it will be later this year, and it will cover my first couple of years working robbery homicide, and it will be called Bring Out Your Dead. And it will cover actually the more complete story of the door number 1 and door number 2 story is in there. But it also covers certainly there are some stories there that aren't funny, but it gives you some insight as to how murders were worked in an era before we had DNA and all the tricky tools. And that will be out, and I'm hoping you will have me on when it comes out, but it'll be called Bring Out Your Dead. And I'm about 3/4 done with it right now.
And the link is below. He just had released another one recently.
Beach Blanket Bedlam.
Beach Blanket, and I hysterical, but it's real. It's not for kids.
No.
It's real stuff. And so, but his link below. And John has written, how many books total have you written?
9 so far. This
They're
will
all-
be my 10th, and I've got probably another 4. Providing I keep my cognition and don't start talking like I have a mouthful of cat food. I've got at least another 4 planned. So, and you will be in the next book, and
About the cat food?
no,
Is
it
Bob-
would be
is
Michael
Bob in your
Ziegler.
next book?
It would be Michael Ziegler.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good one. Don't tell anybody. Let them
I
read
won't.
it.
I won't tell that story.
That's a good one.
But it is. I want to thank you for having me here tonight, Chris, and thanks to these wonderful, your wonderful viewers. Some dynamite questions and great observations.
Yeah, don't leave yet. And
Okay.
has any kidnapping in recent years been successful? That's a great question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I think the last one where they actually paid a ransom that we're aware of, because of course we don't know if that doesn't go to the police, would be when Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped back in the 60s.
Yeah.
I can't think of another one.
Gary, you keep stats.
I'd have to look in my records, but not off the top of my head. I mean, it's
Yeah, I can't think of anything. Who gains from taking Nancy? What's the payoff?
that's the key question.
That's
Yes,
the
it
$1 million
is.
question.
That is the $1 million question. The $64,000.
And we may very well find the answer to that question here very soon, I think. So
It'll all unravel once that's.
That's code for I know Bob Gilliam, and he's got more sources than anybody on the planet. So I'm just going to let that float wherever it is. But I also want to make sure that you guys know that you heard it first here on the interview room. And so would you hit that thumbs up button for us, because it helps the algorithm. And if you have not subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. We would be grateful for that. We work really hard sometimes, and we're just appreciative of everything that you do for us. Also, we thank all of our mods, but also this guy over here, who is also an amazing author. And
You're pointing the other way.
he's
Like
written
Michael
New
Scott.
Evil and other books. They're also in the link below. Dr. Gary Brucato, who's very humble. He has over 119 years of data of mass murders, mass shooters, and he is
A lot of fun at parties.
a scholar extraordinaire, Boston College. He's a forensic psychologist out of New York, out of Manhattan. We don't hold that against him. However, we love him more than, like our brother here. And he brings so much to the table, as you guys know. Okay. And then there's the humble guy up there in the upper right-hand corner again, Bobby. Have you?
And I'm not an author. I can barely write my name. So
Yes.
He uses crayons like me, and but I am humbled always to be in the presence of these guys. Bob is very humble, but when I started as a young copper, he was always he was not only always nice to me, but he was a mentor and an example to not only me, to many other young officers back in the day. Same with John. John and I worked alongside, and I had the luxury at times of him being my boss. And John was the kind of guy who would walk up and say, "Do you guys need something?" And we'd say, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, I'll be right back." He never got in the way, and he let his people do what they needed to do. And Bob was the exact same kind of leader. And that's what we need more of today in these younger officers. So, but you folks out there, the audience, you're what makes this happen. And so we want to keep Nancy in our prayers this evening. We want to keep Savannah in our prayers, their brother, her sister, all the family members. This is a victim-focused channel, but we also want to be reality here, and prepare ourselves, God forbid, if something worst case were to be discovered as we went forward. So thank you, everybody. Go ahead.
Ask you something, Chris, just as we go out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the type of person who did this is watching all this stuff. So my question is, what would we say to him, just in case he's out there in the dark watching this?
For me, what I would say to you is, if you have Miss Guthrie, you've made a mistake. It doesn't make you a bad person. Please just do the right thing internally. Find that piece of that empathy that, her life is as valuable as yours. And what I mean by that, medically, she needs your help. She needs your help. And
well said.
Hopefully we can.
And it's never too late to turn back.
Yep.
Because, as Chris said, a mistake, if you made an ill-considered judgment, you can begin to repair that damage. The other thing I'd say is that you aren't as smart as you think, and they are going to catch you. And probably it would work better for you. You'd have greater control over your own life if you came forward and surrendered yourself.
Yep. Cheers. Aloha, everybody. Thank you guys for being with us tonight. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you all.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No, no one cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.